that my stepmom had been cheating on him, and that he tried to kill her.
Okay.
You saw the bloody photos. In your opinion, does the amount of blood in this case accurately convey how serious the injury is medically?
No, in my opinion, it definitely does not accurately convey the severity or the seriousness of that injury.
She obviously needed to terminate the affair immediately. And then she kind of blurted out that you know, Jonna thinks I'm a monster. And she was like, I'm gonna climb this tree, take pictures of me in this tree. And then I felt like a shove,
Okay.
and I was almost pushed over the edge. You saved my life that day, but
Propofol is the drug that killed Michael Jackson, is that right?
That's right.
You've heard of that story, of course?
Yes.
Okay. That's Ariel the day afterwards, right? And this is you, again, correct?
Yes.
First, he tried to push her. The second, the syringe. He tried to inject her with an unknown substance. And third, the beating with the rock.
The way she describes it makes it sound like he had multiple arms, like an octopus. Look, I'm not saying it wasn't a bad cut, and look, I'm not...
This story is intriguing because, one, the alleged victim is alive. She's able to tell her story and to tell her perspective about what her husband tried to do to her. We got to hear from Ariel talking about how her husband tried to push her off a cliff and that didn't work. There was a syringe that was involved and then he tried to bash her head in. But you see, what makes the story so intriguing is not only do we have the alleged victim who's alive, we have eyewitnesses, we have an, I would say, alleged confession, but the confession wasn't just made to anyone. It was made to the son. There's affair, there's life insurance policies, but we're at a point right now where it is a he said, she said, but you know, it seems like one side is backed up by an overwhelmingly amount of evidence. So let's watch part 2 of the trial recap. We've already uploaded part 1. Feel free to go check it out and enjoy. Thanks for watching this with me. Oh boy, we are going to jump over to witness number 19, Emil Konig. Emil is the biological son of the defendant, 19 years old. And it's, oh gosh, I feel so bad for his son that has to testify, but we're going to get through his testimony. And then I'm going to talk with you guys about what I think about whether or not he's telling the truth, or if, you know, maybe there's some sort of miscommunication somewhere.
All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to scoot forward as much as you can and to speak as much in the microphone as you can, okay?
Okay.
All right, can you start off by stating your name, please?
Emil Konig.
Emil works for Maui Health as a clerk. He is still living with Ariel, his stepmother, and his 2 younger brothers. They're going to just jump into what happened when he received that phone call from his dad that morning. Again, he was back home with his brothers. They had like a babysitter there, and they were in Maui at this point.
Just over a year ago, on the morning of March 24th, 2025, where were you?
I was at home.
Where were you when you got the FaceTime video call at 10:42 a.m.?
At home. Tri-Fit.
What did the defendant tell you during that call, as close to word for word as you can remember?
That he would not be making it back to Maui, and to take good care of the younger kids, and that my stepmom had been cheating on him, and that he tried to kill her.
Okay.
During that call, the next plan that he said was to jump off the cliff.
That is so wild to try to put your child in this position, because the child's going to feel responsible for, or your kid, you know, is going to feel responsible for trying to save you. And if that doesn't work, and he ultimately did end up killing himself, it's going to be on the kid's conscience forever. It's so traumatizing. I can't believe that he would drag his child into this like this.
He said that she had gotten away, and that was all I heard about her location. I went over to my grandparents' house, which is Ariel's parents, walked over to their house, told them what had happened.
Not only that, he also told his biological mom, I think mom's boyfriend or husband, and also told the police that day.
You said that there was a second call at 11:46, is that right?
Correct. I saw the defendant.
Okay. And can you describe any background that you saw on the scene, if you remember?
Just trees, rocks, the sky. He asked me if I had told anybody, and I said yes, and I told him who I had told. And then he said that he was just going to jump, and said that a couple times.
Okay.
And you guys are probably noticing this. Not only does he live with his stepmother, but when he's referring to his father, he's not calling him dad. He's not calling him, you know, daddy. He's saying the defendant. That's putting a huge distance between him and his dad. It's almost as if he wants nothing to do with his dad because of what happened.
To be super exact here, Emil, who did you tell the defendant that you told?
I told that I told my grandparents and my mother.
Okay. So you told them that you told Peter, Judy, and Jesse?
Correct.
Okay. So after the defendant told you he was going to jump a couple times during the second call, how did the second call end?
With him saying with the defendant saying, I'm going to go before the police catch me.
Now we're in cross-examination, and it's quite interesting because remember, in the defense's opening statement, they are going to say that my client never told his son that he was responsible, that he did it. He never said any of those things. So it's kind of interesting because, you know, when the defense attorney is asking questions of his son, he has to make sure that he's very careful because the son is also could be seen as some sort of victim as well. However, at the same time, you also have to rebut his story. So they're going to try to see if they can obfuscate his statement. And you guys let me know if you guys buy it or not.
Your dad was sending photos of them on the hike, yes?
Correct.
Letting you know where they were, right? Yes? I mean, just that they were on a hike, yes?
That they were on a hike, yes, not letting me know where they were.
You remember telling the detective that your dad sounded like he was kind of distressed? Trying to stay calm, but kind of distressed? Remember saying that to the detective?
No.
But you did tell the detective it sounded like he was kind of distressed, right?
And then I said afterwards, he sounded calm.
Yeah, you said it sounded like he was kind of distressed, but trying to stay calm. And he did sound calm. That's what you said, right?
Correct.
Kind of distressed, but trying to stay calm, right?
Yes.
Right?
I don't know if that really helps the defense attorney.
You see blood on your dad's shirt, yes?
Correct.
And he tells you that this was Ariel's blood, yes?
Yes.
And he told you that he was explaining to you about how Ariel had been cheating on him for a couple of months, yes?
Yes.
And he told you that the blood was from her head, correct?
Correct.
And it was also a little confusing to you. You're trying to kind of piece together and make sense of what happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And also trying to convince him not to jump, correct?
Correct.
10:42 call, and about 3 hours after the 11:46 call, right? The interview with the detective.
Yes.
Roughly. And, you know, obviously, you didn't record the call with your dad when you guys were having them. You're just listening to him and talking to him about not jumping, right?
Correct.
And you didn't write down any notes after the call, right after, did you?
Correct. I did not.
But you tried your best, 3 to 4 hours later, to describe the call you had with your dad to the detectives, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like, oh, well, you didn't take notes, you didn't recall, record the call. Maybe it's possible that you could have just remembered incorrectly.
So, but you tried your best to explain to the detectives what you understood your dad to have been saying, correct?
Yes.
But to be clear, it wasn't like an exact word for word, verbatim of the entire conversation, but you did your best, correct?
Yes.
Okay. For example, in an effort to do your best to explain to the detectives on Maui what happened, you initially told the detectives that your dad told you he tried to kill Ariel by pushing her off a cliff. You remember initially saying that to the detective?
Yes.
Okay. And that was what you had kind of assumed, given the things that he told you and where he was on the cliff. That's what you assumed that he meant, right? At least when you said that to the detective, right?
Can you repeat that question?
So when you initially told the detective, my dad told me he tried to kill Ariel by pushing her off a cliff, that's what you assumed your dad had meant, correct? When he said that, you assumed your dad meant that he had tried to. Well, let me phrase it this way. You remember telling the detective initially that your dad told you he tried to kill Ariel by pushing her off a cliff. You remember telling the detective that?
Yes.
Okay. But later on, in the conversation, in the interview, when the detective asked you about that, you clarified and you said the part about pushing her off the cliff was what you assumed he meant, not what he had actually said, correct?
Yes, correct.
So he's trying to say that, hey, 3 hours had passed by. Maybe you had forgotten or remembered things incorrectly. And then additionally, he's also saying that, well, when your dad told you that he was trying to put Ariel off the cliff, you just assumed that's what he meant, right? Like, what else would he mean? Why would your dad say something like that? Of course, you're going to remember something as crazy as that. I don't think it's going to be something that you're just going to mistaken. This next part is quite interesting. So I want you guys to hear it first, and then I wonder if we'll have the same thoughts.
At the time, you had moved to Maui with your dad and Ariel when you were in high school, yes?
Yes.
And that was something that you chose to do, right?
Yes.
Okay. You were in Pittsburgh with where your dad was and your mom, Jessica, was, correct?
Yes.
And so your options were to stay in Pittsburgh with your mom. You could have done that, right?
Yes.
Jessica, right? If you could have stayed in Pittsburgh with her if you chose to, right?
Correct.
Or you could come back to Maui, where your friends were and your girlfriend was, but to do that, you would have to live with Ariel, right? To come back to Maui, you could come back to Maui and live with Ariel, right?
It was an option, yes.
Yeah, it was an option. And over the last year, since this incident, you have continued to live with Ariel, correct?
Yes.
You also would see Ariel's parents, Judy and Pete, regularly over the last year, correct?
Correct.
And you refer to them as your grandparents, yes?
Yes.
And they came with you to court today, yes?
Yes.
Okay. You traveled to California earlier this year for a tournament, right?
I did.
Your grandma and grandpa, your dad's parents were going to meet you in Irvine to watch some of your games, right?
Yep.
And when they got there, Ariel's parents, Judy and Pete, had traveled with you up there, right?
Yes.
And you have not spoken to your dad since the incident, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Emil. That's all the questions I have for you.
So I think where he was getting at was, well, the reason why you're in Maui is not because, you like Ariel necessarily, but probably because you want to be here because your girlfriend's here or your girlfriend, or his ex-girlfriend, I think, job, you like living here. And in order to live here, you have to live with Ariel. So I think that's what he was trying to kind of like bridge over to for the jury's mind. But I think most importantly, I mean, again, like, even though him and his dad have been with Ariel for about like, I think 9 years, like there are some step parents out there that just don't really care about your stepkids. The fact that they still have this, connection and they still live together, I think it means that Emil believes Ariel. And in order to believe Ariel, well, his dad probably told him the things that he said that day. We also hear from Ariel's parents, which is Emil's grandparents, and they are going to talk about how that day when Emil came into their house, he was, like he was really upset. He was shaking, and they're not able to say what Emil told them, but just to kind of like give the jury a state of mind of how distressed Emil was. And then after this, the state decides to rest. So let's start with the defense's witnesses. Who was witness number one? Let me see. Oh, it was the restaurant guy. Okay. So witness number one was the owner of, I think, Fett Restaurant. And basically the defense had him there to say that, like, look, hey, the day that Ariel and, Gerhardt got into this fight, well, Gerhardt didn't have the intention of killing her, because why else would he make reservations for her and him to celebrate the birthday dinner that night? I want to come back and talk about that. I think when we get into a different witness. And then their witness number two, Dr. Arden. Dr. Arden is going to talk about Ariel's injuries and say that, yeah, it looks bad, there's a lot of blood coming out, but it's not as bad as you think it is. Basically going to the defense's opening statement that, how he kept reiterating over and over again, it's bad. It's like, it looks bad because there's a lot of blood everywhere, but it's really not that serious. Like, she was fine. She didn't lose consciousness or anything like that. She didn't get a skull fracture. She's fine.
When you reached out to me for this case, I was asked to assess the injuries that Ms. Konig had and to compare them to the accounts of how the injuries occurred, and to determine the nature and severity of those injuries and whether they did or did not match the accounts for how they occurred. The scalp tissue is what we call, in medical terminology, highly vascularized.
What do you mean by that? Highly vascular.
Excuse me, that's fancy language for it has a great deal of blood supply. So, if you damage the scalp tissue, which has a great deal of blood supply, it will bleed excessively. In fact, scalp lacerations are notorious for bleeding tremendously. This is, something that's even, for many people, common knowledge, that if you get an impact to your head, if you split open the scalp, even a small laceration, tends to bleed tremendously, and sometimes it looks pretty horrific.
I know you have a cough.
Yes, thank you.
So much. I'm going to hand you this water.
Thank you.
But still, damage was done to her head. When you are bashing someone's head in with a rock, what do you think the intention is? It's getting hit in the head is pretty serious. It's not a small thing.
You saw bloody photos. In your opinion, does the amount of blood in this case accurately convey how serious the injury is medically?
No, in my opinion, it definitely does not accurately convey the severity or the seriousness of that injury.
Injuries in this case did not create a substantial risk of death and did not rise to the level of serious bodily injury. Do you, after your review, doctor, in your opinion, do you agree with the Queen's doctors in that regard?
I do, very much so.
In those statements, like you noted, she reported that she was hit with a rock up to 10 times, and at times she said full blast, 100% of his power, all over her head. As an expert in the field of forensic pathology, in your opinion, were her injuries consistent with her statement that she was hit up to 10 times full blast with 100% of his power?
No, sir, they were not.
And why not?
Well, several reasons. First of all, the injury she has is largely localized. It may be stellate, but it's still largely localized. Almost all of the impact injury she has is localized to one area of the head. So it's not consistent with all over the head. Frankly, it's also not consistent with likely being up to or around 10 impacts. It's consistent with fewer impacts.
But here's the thing. When you're getting attacked, it probably feels like you're getting hit all over the head. It probably feels like you're getting hit 10 times. It probably felt like the person was going full blast at it, because you're bleeding profusely. It probably felt like that. And then keep in mind, Ariel is fighting back. She's not just laying there and like he has a chance to keep hitting her in the same spot. She's like actively fighting back. They're like wrestling each other, and she's trying to get him to like get that syringe out of his like hand, and then like the vial and all that stuff. So there's a lot that's happening here. But I don't know. Okay.
And the other thing is the part of the element in your question about full blast, using all of his strength with the rock. That would very likely result in more severe injury.
Okay.
It would likely result in skull fracture. It would likely result in bleeding around the brain or brain injury itself.
Okay. Now, you indicated, not consistent with, up to or close to 10 blows. In your report, did you say that, you say in your report that your opinion is that it reflects several impacts at most. If you can explain what you meant by that.
Yes. What I intended to convey with that wording of several impacts is that, in my opinion, that stellate laceration is most consistent with being approximately 2 to 3 impacts with the rock.
Okay. So possibly 2?
Yes.
But to be fair, you indicated that looking at it, possibly could be 3, right?
Yes. My best estimate is approximately 2 to 3 as being most likely.
Okay, thank you.
So if that damage was 2 to 3 impacts, well, what about Gerhardt? Gerhardt claimed that Ariel striked him with the rock a few times. How come Gerhardt didn't really have much damage? It was very minimal from what we saw in pictures so far.
Yes, she did state that.
And did you find any injuries to be consistent with that statement?
No. She had said being grabbed by the hair and having her head bashed into the ground, the back of her head. There's no description of any injury to the back of her head in the medical records, nor were there any brain injuries. There's a particular pattern of brain injuries that could occur if the moving head strikes the stationary ground.
I mean, there could have been dirt on the ground, leaves. We don't know what's on the. I think when we saw pictures, it could have been like dirt on the ground. So it's possible that when he was taking her head and then bashing into the ground, well, it's not like cement underneath, and that's why there wasn't like significant damage.
Such as being bashed into the ground that way, and she didn't have any of those either.
Okay.
At this point, I was also wondering, is he going to make any statements about the injuries that were sustained by his client? Probably not, because even though they are arguing in front of the jury that, these are the injuries that Gerhardt got from Ariel, I seriously doubt they're going to have this guy talk about the damages because there really wasn't that much. So it would be very telling if he doesn't say anything about Gerhardt's injuries and how Ariel was the one that did it to him.
I want to ask you about, you made some comments about her eye injury. Are the orbital bones around the eye thin and fragile?
Some of them are. The orbit is the eye socket, and some of the bones that form the eye socket, especially the roof of the eye socket, as we call it, those are very thin, fragile bones that can be easily broken.
Let's get into the cross-examination by the state.
In this section, you're actually discussing an email Ariel Konig sent to her primary care physician. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that was an email in which Ariel Konig asked for consistency's sake, for the primary care physician to add concussion or TBI to her chart. Is that right?
Yes, that's true.
And based on the opinion you gave, concussion and traumatic brain injury are the same thing, right?
Concussion and mild traumatic brain injury are equivalent terms. They describe the same entity, yes.
So you saw nothing wrong with Ariel's email, right?
Right.
Well, objection, Your Honor, that's beyond the scope of his opinion testimony. There's something morally wrong with her, This is cross-examination.
And again, you saw...
object during cross-examination, so my objection is...
Just to clarify, one more time, you didn't see anything wrong with Ariel sending that email to her PCP, did you?
I made no judgment about that email, right, wrong, or other. I made a comment on the substance of it and its meaning.
Because remember, the defense team brought up, well, Ariel, when you reached out to your primary care provider, you told them to add concussion as if, trying to allude to she was trying to play up her injuries and they weren't really as serious as they were, but she wanted to lie about it.
Dr. Arden, isn't it true that Ariel Konig never said she got hit 10 times in the head?
Right, she said up to or about 10 times, yes. The number that she used in the descriptions was 10, but she didn't say absolutely it was 10. She said up to 10.
So your conclusion about, she didn't get hit 10 times is not actually based on what Ariel said, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
It is based on what she said. I didn't say in my report that she said she was struck 10 times, and that was the only statement she made. But the only number that she cited was 10. And so that was kind of a landmark for me to respond to, that's all.
And it's very clear from her statement that 10 times was an estimate, correct?
Yes.
And it was the maximum number, right?
Yes.
So her statement is not inconsistent with a lower number, is that correct?
It is not inconsistent with a lower number.
In your opinion, where you state that you would expect to see skull fractures if the defendant was swinging the rock with full force, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Skull fractures are very dangerous, correct?
They may be dangerous. They are not always, but they may be. And the concern with the skull fracture is also that it represents a degree of force applied to the head such that the fracture itself may be dangerous, but more importantly, the associated injuries are likely to be dangerous.
And that's the kind of injury that you would expect to see done with Exhibit 2, this rock?
If it had been wielded with full force by an adult male and had been...
And your opinion is now still that an adult male using full force could cause, or you would expect to see skull fractures, correct?
If there had been up to 10 blows with full force, yes.
Dr. Arden, I'll ask you this way. It's much, much easier to hit a stationary object, right?
I think that's a fair generalization.
It's much, much easier to hit a person's head if they are entirely stationary, not moving, correct?
Makes sense to me, yes.
On the other side, it's much, much harder to hit that person's head if they're moving around and squirming. Is that right?
I'm not going to be able to answer a question with too muches in it. If the person is moving, it likely introduces an element where it is at least somewhat harder to hit the head because the head is moving. In some circumstances, there could be so much movement that it is much, much more difficult to hit. In some circumstances, the movement could be to a lesser degree, and striking it could be pretty easy.
But if Ariel's getting hit in the head with the rock, I'm pretty sure she'll be moving a lot more, not just moving very minimally.
And Dr. Arden, the last thing I want to get with this opinion, there's an assumption in what you wrote there that it's a clean hit. Isn't that right?
No. That's why I asked for clarification. It's not an assumption. I'm basing this on what was described about this rock, and I'm basing this on the evidence from her scalp laceration, knowing what it looked like and what its configuration was. So whether there's a clean hit or a clean hit and a not so clean hit isn't an assumption at all. I'm basing it on what actually happened, what resulted.
You don't know how hard the defendant swung that rock, do you, Dr. Arden?
I do not. That's correct.
The only...
Hey, maybe Gerhardt just didn't spend enough time in the gym, and that's the reason why when he swung and hit Ariel 10 times, it didn't result in a skull fracture.
Concussion symptoms were, quote, entirely self-reported. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that means you were essentially saying you didn't see any physical evidence to corroborate what you said about concussion. Is that right?
I'm not sure if it's just physical evidence. There was no medical so I'm just saying that her concussion symptoms were self-reported. That's all.
Okay. And again, you didn't find anything medically to corroborate that. Is that right?
Right, because there can't be.
One of the symptoms that Ariel disclosed was nausea, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's a very common symptom of concussion, right?
It is.
Isn't it true that the Queen's medical reports list that Ariel Konig vomited 3 times in the ambulance on the way to Queens?
Yes, sir.
Now we're going to segue over to the injury that Ariel had on her thumb.
You thought this crush injury was not related to Ariel Konig's head injury, is that right?
It is not her head injury. It's a different injury.
You reviewed the testimony of Ariel Konig's grand jury, or you reviewed the transcript of Ariel Konig's testimony of the grand jury, correct?
Yes, sir.
That Ariel stated at the grand jury proceeding, I also have a fractured thumb, you know, and finger lacerations from trying to keep the rock off my face so I could maintain consciousness. According to the statement, was trying to block the rock with her hand, right?
Yes.
And she suffered a crushing injury to her thumb, right?
Correct.
And this was somehow, and you deemed this not relevant to Ariel's head injury.
I deemed it separate from her head injury. She has a thumb injury. She has head injuries. The thrust of my opinions were assessing her head injury. I didn't ignore the thumb injury. I didn't omit it from the report, but I didn't discuss it or opine.
You provided an opinion about the level of force you believe was used, isn't that right?
I provided an opinion regarding Ms. Konig's accounting of her description of the level of force, yes.
And the fact that there was a broken bone did not factor into that opinion, is that right?
Correct.
Even though that bone was blocking her skull, right?
That bone is a couple of millimeters in size.
Objection, non-responsive.
I don't, he's answering the question, Your Honor.
Okay, Dr. Arden, if I ask you a yes or no question, are you willing to give me a yes or no answer?
Your Honor, it's an improper question. You can ask the next question and we can deal with it.
Hold up her hand to block that rock is highly relevant to the level of injury she sustained.
No.
You say no. Okay. Hypothetically here, doctor. We've
Can you
talked.
explain? Can you explain this answer?
No. Next question. You can ask them.
All right, doctor.
Where the state is getting at is that, well, you said that, you doubt there was full force used to crush Ariel's head in with the rock. However, there was a broken bone in her thumb. What about that? Did you think about that? Because Ariel would have used her hand to try to block the rock from hitting her, and instead, the thumb was the one that made contact, and that was what ended up breaking.
It's very clear that a blocking hand is an interfering force, right?
Objection, objection. Argumentative. Phraseology of question.
Next question.
You don't believe that a block is interfering with the defendant swinging that rock at Ariel.
It's not what you asked.
Do you believe, or isn't it true, that Ariel blocking the defendant from that rock that's, I think, still in front of you, with her hand, is an intervening force?
No, it is not an intervening force.
Isn't it true that Ariel blocking helped protect her head?
Oh, come on. I feel like this guy's just purposely being evasive.
Can't answer it as yes or no.
Isn't it true that blocking a hit with your hand protects what's underneath?
The real answer is sometimes.
And again, this is all things that you didn't think were pertinent to Ariel's head injuries, right?
Answered.
They're not pertinent to the analysis and opinions that I offered about her head injuries. That's true.
They're going to go back to Ariel's photo, and I mean, it looks like there's a chunkling missing, but the doctor's going to say something different.
Dr. Arden, you'd agree that this image shows the depth of Ariel's injuries, is that right?
Well, this photograph actually does a very bad job of showing the depth of the scalp laceration.
This photo shows a large chunk of her scalp missing, isn't that right?
Objection, Your Honor. This photo speaks for itself. Same. That's an inaccurate description.
I'm going to zoom in on the top right of this photo, Dr. Arden. This is the area of impact, is that right?
Part of it. Again, the picture isn't taken for that, and it's not displaying that particularly well, but it's part of the area of impact.
And how deep is this injury in this photo, Dr. Arden?
I can't tell from that photo how deep the injury is. I mean, we've already established, and I've agreed in testimony, that it went through the full thickness of the scalp down to the skull bone. This photo is not demonstrating that.
However, if you're the jury and you disagree with what the doctor says because you're looking with your own eyes, then it's possible that the jury might not find this doctor's testimony to be quite credible, maybe heavily biased.
There's also nothing in your report about the presence of rock in her injury, correct?
Correct.
You didn't include that there's presence of rock throughout Ariel's scalp injury, is that right?
I did not include specifically what foreign material was in her scalp laceration. I did mention it having to be cleaned out, but I did not include that detail.
So I think what the state prosecution is really, kind of like elbowing at is he hit her so hard that chunks of the rocks came off and it was embedded in her head.
You stated in your report that there were no injuries to the back of Ariel's head, correct?
I did.
You said nothing about the environment of where her head was hit on the ground, correct?
Correct.
You said nothing about whether the ground was rocky and hard, right?
Correct.
You said nothing about whether there was piles of brush on the ground underneath her head, is that right?
Correct.
And the surface could be a reasonable explanation as to why there isn't such an injury, is that right?
It's a possibility.
But you didn't do that analysis, fair?
Correct. The bottom line was there were no injuries to corroborate that aspect of her account, and that was what I was commenting on.
Now, looking at the ground in this photo, Dr. Arden, it's not rocks, is that right?
Correct.
It's brush and what looks like straw, is that right?
Excuse me, what?
It's brush and what looks like straw, is that right?
I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong. Anyway,
It looks like the ground, there's some vegetation. I have no idea if that's straw or not, but there's grassy looking stuff and there's some leafy vegetation, and it's the ground.
This is a softer surface than concrete, correct, Doctor?
It is.
This is a softer surface than lava rock, right, Doctor?
It is.
And the purpose of that is to not bias your report. Is that fair to say?
It's a combination. It is a statement about not being biased. It's also kind of a blanket statement that I don't get paid more if the side that hired me wins. I get paid the same regardless of what happens.
But there is an interest in future business, isn't there right? Isn't that right, Doctor?
Well, there's always an interest in future business, but that doesn't overcome what we've already talked about, that you get the same opinion from me no matter who you are. It's based on the facts and the medicine. And let's face it, future business isn't such a big interest of mine. I'm trying to get retired and it's not working.
Your interest in future business would encourage you to say what you think Mr. Otake wants you to say, isn't that right?
No, that's not right at all. No.
Your interest in future business encourages you to minimize Ariel's injuries, isn't that right?
No, absolutely not. My interest in future business is doing business honestly with attorneys who are honest, and that's what I do. And you've already heard the answer during direct exam. I tell lots of lawyers that their clients are screwed. And that's what happens. Sometimes the truth hurts, but that's what they get from me.
I think it's good to get a moment of laughter from, I don't know, the jury participating in that, if it was only just the people in the gallery. But if you're the jury, I think you can see it both ways, that, well, if he's really trying to retire, then it's possible that he might just trying to, really go along with what the defense attorneys may want because he wants to not tarnish his reputation, because if he starts testifying and saying things that defense attorneys don't like, then maybe they will be kind of like unwilling to hire him again in the future and work with him. So I think it can go either way, honestly.
Dr. Arden, your interest in future business encourages you to ignore the facts that are bad for your conclusion. Isn't that right?
No, not right.
Doctor, would you sacrifice your integrity for 14 grand?
No way.
You were asked questions about the thumb. Well, multiple questions. There was more you were about to say. I want to follow up with that. You were talking about why. Well, first of all, you did include the thumb in your report, right?
I mentioned it, yes.
Yeah, and you referred to it as a you called it an impact injury, right?
I did.
You didn't have to call it that, did you?
Well, that's what it was.
Yeah, but my point is, you included that in your report, right?
I did.
Now, you were starting to say you were trying to demonstrate to the jury. What are we talking about here? You said just the front tip, small portion of the thumb.
Yes, the fracture was of the tip of this bone that's at the tip of the thumb. So the area that was fractured was very small.
All right. right, so remember I told you guys, this is a trial of he said, she said, and we already got to hear from the she said. The he said is coming right up because the defendant is going to be testifying in this case, and he's going to give his version of events and how it went down.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, we'll call Dr. Gerhardt Konig to stand. Okay, please.
You do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please, have a seat. Okay. If you could please state your full name for the record and for the members of the jury.
Gerhardt Konig,
Gerhard, how old are you?
47.
And were your parents from South Africa?
Yes.
What are their names, and are they still alive, and are they still married?
Yeah, Peter and Annabelle, they're alive and married.
Okay. And they've been here, is that them here in the front row?
That's it.
So he's got quite of a bubbly voice. He doesn't sound creepy. He doesn't seem like, I don't know, like I would feel like if I would just to interact with him right off the bat, I'd be like, oh, okay, he seems like an okay guy. So he's from South Africa. He was 47 years old at the time. When he was 20 years old, he married his first wife, had 2 kids together, and Emil was one of them. In 2016, he was on eHarmony, which is I don't know if do people still use eHarmony? It's like a dating website online. I think it was one of the first, and that's how he met Ariel. They married in 2018. In 2020, they had their first child together. At some point, I think they moved to Maui, and then in 2023, they had their second son. Now, Emil had a pretty good relationship with his father at the time. I think he was 9 years old when the divorce happened. And so he wanted to come out and move to Maui to be with his father, live with his stepmother. And it seems like things were completely fine. Not only that, they were pretty lucky. Ariel's family also moved from, I think, Florida to Maui to be there. I mean, quite honestly, if you have all these people to help you take care and like raise your kids, that's great. So I feel like they had a pretty good system going on, assuming they all got along together. Now, he's going to talk about how before, 2024, which is when things were happening, he thought he had a really good marriage with Ariel. By this point, their youngest son was 1 or 2 years old. And so, it's when he came across these text messages between Ariel and the coworker, it was just really surprising for him. And, I quite honestly really do feel for him.
Did there come a time in 2024 when Ariel traveled to South Africa for work?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was roughly?
At the end of August of 2024.
And who was she going with, to your knowledge, at the time?
It was a pretty important trip for her because it was just the CEO of the company, another man that was high up in the company called Jeff Miller, and herself.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you this. When she was working?
Yeah, she had a home office set up, but it was
in her house?
In our house,
Okay.
but it was in our bedroom. So, and there was no divider or anything between it. So her desk was basically right next to our bed. So like 2 p.m.
So were you, because it was in your bedroom, were you exposed a lot to
A lot.
her
Yeah.
work and her? Prior to this, leading up to this South Africa trip, you mentioned did she go with a man named Jeff Miller?
Yes.
Did you have any concerns about Jeff Miller at that time?
No.
I know you mentioned no concerns, but was there anything weird on that trip, behavior-wise, that you took notice of? The South African trip?
Yeah, it was a really quick trip. It was just 2 nights. But the one weird thing was that on the second night, I remember noticing that she never contacted me at the end of the day, and that's kind of out of character. Whenever she went on work trips, she would always kind of check in at some point. And, at the end of the day, even usually we would check in several times during the day as well, and just do text. We would text a lot.
Okay.
And the one night on that trip, she never reached out. And I was at work, and by the time I got home and realized that she hadn't reached out, I knew she was asleep, and so I didn't reach out to her either. But normally she would reach out to me when she's done with her work day.
Did you see much of it at the time, or?
No, I took note of it, and I asked her about it, and she just said, like, I'm so sorry. We got back late from dinner with the hosts that were hosting us, and I'm sorry. I should have texted, but I didn't.
Now, she returns from South Africa.
There was a few meetings that she still had to do that she couldn't to him on the phone and from the other room, and it just seemed very they had a very familiar tone, more so than what I was used to. The way that she used to talk to him, and the way that she talked to her other work colleagues.
Now, you get back from Kauai after the trip. From October to December. Did you notice any other red flags or concerning behavior?
Yeah. So
what happened?
The biggest. Well, the only thing that I noticed was that she was constantly on her phone. She was just constantly on her phone.
Was that more so than usual?
Yeah, much more than usual. And she would hide the screen from me. So
what do you mean by that?
Like, if you're sitting next to somebody and they're on their phone, like, you can just notice that they're sitting in a way. They're constant. They're always just like moving their.
What if you walked into a room when she was on?
Yeah, when I walked in the room, she would turn the screen off or turn her phone upside down.
Did you ask her about it?
I did several times, and she would always say, "I'm talking to Gianna. I'm talking to Gianna," which is her best friend.
Who's Gianna?
Gianna's her best friend.
Okay.
I think members of the jury could find him to be likable. Quite honestly, the way that he's testifying on the stand, he doesn't really give me any red flags at the moment. He doesn't seem like a shady guy. And I think there could be some sympathy for him because he just got, he's talking about this affair that his wife is having. But, again, when you're the jury, these type of emotions are not supposed to affect your judgment. You're supposed to follow the law. So let's continue listening to him when he found out about the affair.
So Monday night, when I looked at her phone, I went to the screen time application on the iPhone, and then I noticed that the app with the highest usage was an app called WhatsApp. And I was
What is WhatsApp?
WhatsApp is a communications app. So it has texting, it has voice calls and video calls. So instead of using your phone's built-in texting or voice or video, you go through WhatsApp.
Okay.
And it's separate. So she had everything silenced from
Okay.
WhatsApp. And it wasn't like on the main screen. It was like a couple pages over in a folder, so it was kind of hidden.
So did you open the WhatsApp?
Yeah, so I opened the WhatsApp.
What did you see?
There were saw was that the messages from Monday and from Sunday, so the previous 2 days, it was like a full-on conversation the entire day long, and it would start
All day
off. Yeah, and it would start off at like 2 a.m. Hawaii time. So Jeff Miller lives in Maryland, and he travels extensively for work. Like he probably travels 3 out of every 4 weeks, and I know this because I'm always hearing them on the phone and talking about that. So basically, wherever he was, he'd be texting her good morning, but it wasn't just like a good morning text. It was like 5 or 6, good morning. I had a great, I slept great. I'm looking forward to the day. I hope you're sleeping great. And then at like 5:45 a.m., her good morning.
She would be responding.
She would respond, and then the whole day long, like, this is where I am. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm thinking. Previous days.
So Sunday is a weekend, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you saw on a Sunday. We saw the text from December 1st.
She's I'm at work. I'm on call for the weekend, and she's at home decorating and hanging out with the kids and
texting him all day.
Texting him all day.
Okay.
And then.
Go ahead.
When I scroll back past that, it's very strange because then between, so the thread was created on June 4th or something like that, because WhatsApp puts when the thread was created in the app.
Okay.
And there was no messages between June 4th and August 30th, which was like a few days after the South Africa trip. And then between August 30th and Sunday, it was very strange because there was like fragments of conversation or little short things, and then mostly just pictures and songs and links. And it was basically Jeff sending her a bunch of pictures of himself, a bunch of song links that she had saved, and her sending him like a bunch of pictures too of. Did
you when you said it was strange because there were things missing? Did it seem to you like things were being deleted?
Well, yeah, because obviously that was. There was an abrupt cutoff between like what's before Sunday and Monday and that conversation and everything else that was on. I was devastated. So I had actually started using WhatsApp myself when we moved to Maui, because that's the main communication platform the anesthesiology group uses. And so
What did you do the next?
so I took her phone upstairs to my computer, which is in the hallway upstairs, and I logged into her WhatsApp on my computer,
So you could watch her.
so I could
activity.
see. Cause yeah,
Okay. You mentioned being devastated. I mean, prior to this, did you have any, aside from we talked about the red flags, but marriage-wise, I mean, everything seemed okay?
everything seemed fabulous. We were. We were very happy. So the next day, it was basically the same type of thing that they were doing on Sunday and Monday. So they start off by saying good morning, and then just wasn't communication the entire day. But this day, she started deleting messages, and so one of the first things that she did is she deleted all of the messages from Sunday and Monday.
Okay, so when you went, make sure you put the mic a little closer. So when you saw the messages the night before,
Yes.
and now you're looking at it.
As soon as the conversation proceeded, kind of passed, she would kind of keep deleting the
Okay.
previous messages. Conversation you have with a coworker. This is a conversation you have with your spouse. I mean, this is
And after watching that all day long, what did you conclude? I mean, in terms of what was going on, did you believe?
I mean, she was having an affair.
Okay.
Yes. So the first thing I did, actually, the night that I unlocked her phone, because on WhatsApp you can also export the thread basically and save the thread, and so I exported the thread to my phone. So I had copies of what was on there when I first discovered it. Red eye on Tuesday night. And so on Tuesday, when I was first discovering and watching this kind of in person for the first time,
Let me stop you there.
she's packing
Just to help the jury. So Monday night is when you first found the WhatsApp chain, is that right?
Right. So Monday overnight.
Tuesday
So Tuesday
day.
morning, I wake up and I start looking at them interacting in real
Throughout the day.
time during the day.
And then Ariel's supposed to leave that night.
And so she's supposed to leave that night.
Do you confront her before she leaves?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so she leaves. Who do you first reach out to?
And she's basically keeping him up to. I mean, first thing is like as soon as she lands in Phoenix in the morning, she's like, just landed. I have an hour and a half. If you're free, we can chat. Can't wait to talk to you.
Is she texting you, keeping you up to date?
Like I'm getting. I also got a just landed text, but like nothing else.
Okay.
And but she's like reaching out to him, and on WhatsApp, like you can see when a message has been read, and so as soon as she saw that he read her just landed text, she called him. Like she didn't wait for him to respond and stuff. And like I'm not getting a call, I'm not getting any of this stuff. And then during the day, she's sending him pictures of the places that they're of her and Gianna doing stuff,
So you're seeing this?
So I'm seeing this, and that's at that point I'm just like, I can't go to San Luis Obispo and not confront her about this right away. Like,
and going back to Bryant, right? So I know.
Yeah.
Did you guys have like fun activities planned? It was supposed to be a fun couple trip?
So I mean, it was supposed to be a couple's trip, right? And it was Gianna's birthday, and actually Ari planned it because she.
Was it?
It was, yeah. Brian basically, Brian had like a one-night stand, and Gianna found out about it. And
so they had been dealing
kicked
with
him
that
out of the
for
house
that.
and stuff. Yeah.
So he joins his wife and his best friend's wife. So he joins his wife and his best friend and their wife. So he joins his wife with his best friend with his wife on this couple's trip. And this is where the confrontation happens. Now, Gerhardt had already been in communications with his best friend and apparently told the best friend's wife at the dinner table when Ariel was, I don't know, maybe in the bathroom or something like that. So Ariel was upset initially because she felt like she wanted to be able to talk to Gerhardt first. But, quite honestly, will she get any sympathy points for that? No.
Yeah, I confront her with it, and she's immediately remorseful and doesn't deny anything, admits to it, and is crying and
Let me ask you this. You say admits to it, and when Ms. Konig testified, she kept using the term, you guys use the term emotional affair, but in that time period, what did she admit to? Having a...
She admitted to having an affair, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With Jeff Miller.
Yeah, she admitted this was completely inappropriate relationship,
And so you
we
mentioned
called it an affair from the start.
Did Ari have other concerns about her moving out?
Yes.
What was that? Tell the jury about that.
Yeah, so I mean, she obviously needed to terminate the affair immediately, but also to terminate all contact with Jeff Miller, and that would involve her quitting her job and getting a new job. So the San Luis Obispo trip ended on Sunday, and then on Sunday, I was going to fly back to Maui to take care of the kids, and she was flying to Seattle, and she had a week-long business trip in Seattle, starting right after this.
Oh, right after? Mm-hmm. She was going to go straight? And Mr. Miller was supposed to be there?
Yes.
Did you later learn anything about the hotel situation related to that?
Not even later. It was. I mean, so while we were in San Luis Obispo and while we're still talking about all these things, I told her basically, I'm not okay with you going to Seattle. And she said, no, I totally understand. And she said, I'm going to cancel that trip. And she admitted that she had changed her hotel from the hotel that she was supposed to stay in with her primary team that she works with at Terra Power to the hotel that Jeff Miller was in, and they already had dinner plans for Sunday night.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, yikes. This would have been after this trip. Oh.
And then she canceled that trip.
But she canceled all of that. So she told work she had a family emergency and couldn't go, and so we flew back together to Maui on Sunday.
We saw the email that you sent at some point to Mr. Miller's wife, right?
Oh, yeah. And I did that in San Luis Obispo.
Yeah. And that was in San Luis Obispo. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the day that I found out.
Yeah. And
that's not true. That's the day that I confronted her about it.
And why'd you do that?
I just felt that if I was in her shoes, I would want to know.
She was kind of initially willing to do some of these things, but then seemed to become unwilling?
Yeah, so basically it seemed like her whole attitude changed really within a few days of us getting back to Maui.
Tell us about that.
She started minimizing the affair and trying to say that wasn't like a big deal, and she started blaming me for the affair and just saying like, well, you caused some of these things, and some of the,
okay.
telling me some of the things that I was doing that potentially contributed to her doing.
Was she open to your questions about, hey, let me see your phone, or who are you calling?
Like on and off, she would get defensive and get irritated at me, basically asking those things.
So when she was kind of now backing off of some of the things you guys initially agreed to, did that cause you to kind of go into detective mode again and look into try to obtain more information about the extent of her relationship?
Yeah, and I found out that. When they were in South Africa on our phone bill, actually, there's records of them texting just through regular text, like up through past like 10 o'clock on that night that she never got back to me,
okay.
And then again like a 1-minute phone call at 5:30 the next morning local time, and I was like, that seems odd. And then in that combined with in the work thread that they had on the WhatsApp, not the personal one, the work one, the next morning they're talking about work stuff, but then they're also talking about how they can barely stay awake and they're both so tired and
so that made you wonder.
Yeah, I just.
What else did you learn? What else new things did you learn?
And then the other thing was just the sheer scope of the number of deleted messages, because I saw that WhatsApp has a statistics area where you can go to for that deleted over 10,000 messages.
So, I mean, this happens, right? When you lose trust in someone, you start going back and thinking about all the other interactions and how, maybe there were other opportunities where they could have cheated on me. So she brought this up, and apparently he said that she wouldn't engage, and she was like, stop asking questions. They get into a big fight, I think, on day after Christmas, and then December 27th. Again, asking her to move out, that if you're not doing what you're saying, you need to take accountability. And so we do go through some of the counseling that was done between the two of them. However, based on what Gerhardt was saying, it seems like the counseling was to address the affair. However, the session started pivoting to how Gerhardt was contributing to, this relationship in terms of why the affair could have happened. There was also some intimacy issues that were brought up. Basically, she's so upset about other things going on in the relationship that she wasn't sure if she wanted to stay with me, and that and then she kind of blurted out that Jana thinks I'm a monster, and she had talked to her mom, and her mom also agrees that this isn't a big deal. And so I was really concerned and suspicious that she was basically lying to them and telling them a completely different version of what was going on in our relationship, and then also what the affair entailed.
Okay. And so the audio device was what?
So I was like, I have to catch her in a lie, basically. And so it was me like thinking like kind of like an engineer. How do I fix this? And I was like, I fix it by getting more evidence. And so so I bought that in the hopes of basically. So I was going to use it to record conversations that we would have, and then the two of us. And then if things weren't moving in the right direction, I can be like, listen, this is what you said. Listen, like this is what she's telling me.
Or was he trying to use this secret recorder that was voice activated, by the way, to maybe plant it in her office to see how her conversations with Jeff are really like without him being there? Could be both.
Because if she's telling a different story to her mom Judy and to Gianna,
Okay.
then I could basically catch her in a lie.
Did you end up actually using it?
I tested it and figured out how to use it, and never actually used it for that purpose. We ended up not ever talking about the affair at home, and that was kind of one of the other things that she was able to do through therapy, is that we were not allowed to discuss the affair at home anymore.
So remember that. In therapy, they decided to not discuss anything involving the affair at home anymore. All right, let's talk about the trip. So again, this was brought up again, him going through the security checkpoint, and I'm wondering, how did he get the syringes on Oahu? Was he able to bring it somehow undetected? Or did he get the syringes when he arrived in Oahu? So I do have questions about that.
Did you go through the TSA checkpoint with her and your carry-on bags?
Yes,
Were there any problems going through the TSA checkpoint?
not at all. No, the bags weren't searched or anything.
You guys had a good day? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Were you trying to do something nice for her birthday?
Yes.
Okay. Let's zoom in again. Is this the hotel room you guys are in?
Yes.
Okay, and it's the day before the hike, yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I am noticing, though, these photos are all taken by him. Does he normally like to take photos and selfies of them two together? Or was he doing a little too much by taking pictures to really tell people that, hey, look at how much I love my wife. I mean, we're taking pictures together. I'm taking these selfies of us on the trip together. Was he just doing too much? I don't know. I just want to know what his normal pattern behavior is when it comes to going on vacation. Is he a picture taking guy? Or is it only for this occasion because he wants to prove something?
Now, did you receive an email that morning that you shared with Ariel before the hike dealing with life insurance?
Yes. So I talked to Ari, and we both applied for life insurance at the same time at the end of
Did you get the
January.
same amount?
No.
Why not?
The idea was that if one spouse would die, the other one would be able to continue on and live in the same house. And so it was, since I made significantly more money than she did, it was basically enough money that she could pay off the house if I would die.
So what so what was the plan in terms of the amount you were trying to get on your life for her?
$1.5 million.
Okay. And then when you guys did the analysis of what, if something happened to her, you would still have your salary to pay for the house and whatnot.
That's right.
So what was the amount that was decided for her?
$250,000.
Okay.
So I do give him bonus points. At least he's not an idiot like Corey Richens, who took out life insurance policy on her husband, allegedly. Now, with Gerhardt, it's possible that he just might be your above average, sophisticated criminal, okay? He was maybe taking pictures to document that, look, I love my wife. I'm taking selfies with her. And then when it comes to taking the life insurance policy, well, maybe it would be a little too suspicious if he only took it out on her. So he's like, I'll do like $250K. Like, I'm not going to get too greedy. And then if something were to happen to me, I'll do 1.5. Maybe it will look less suspicious. All right, I'm going to jump over to we'll call it altercation. So this is how he says this whole thing started. And again, he said that it wasn't his fault. Ariel was the one who brought up the topic of Jeff Miller.
Ari says, hey, I need to talk to you about something. I'm working on this project with Jeff Miller, and I'm going to need to travel with him again, and I need you to be okay with that. Is that okay?
Okay.
My question is, Can we verify with Jeff Miller or her company that there was a project happening during this time where she would need to travel with Jeff? And then secondly, why would Ariel break this news onto her husband on her birthday during this hike? Doesn't seem like a very ideal time to do it. Doesn't really make sense. And we're also 5 minutes into the hike. It's like you're almost asking for an argument.
You mentioned you guys weren't talking about the affair at home anymore because of counseling, correct?
That's correct.
And
I mean, even the defense attorney was like, yeah, you guys aren't supposed to talk about this. You're only supposed to talk about it during counseling. So why would Ariel do this to herself?
I'm very surprised. Yeah.
okay. Were you upset and angry?
I wasn't angry. I was surprised and upset, and I told her no. Like I'm not okay with that. And not only am I not okay with that, like I'm never going to be okay with that. Like we haven't dealt with that part. Like the only reason why I was okay with her still even working there is because we had placed these limits on their communication. But in my mind, like she still needed at some point to quit her job, and this was only put on hold while we were trying to deal with all these other things. She basically said like, well, I can't quit my job right now because I don't even know if I want to stay with you. So we were dealing with like the issues that she brought up first, but it's not like any of the affair had been resolved at all. Like it had just kind of been put on hold. And so I need you to move out. Like this has gone far enough. I need you to move out. And I'm going to tell people why you're moving out, and I'm going to show them what you did, because like unless you face this and unless you take full accountability for this, like we're never going to get through this.
Did she say anything to you about her mom and Gianna?
She did. So like earlier in the conversation, she had be like, well, what if my mom chaperones my work trips with him? And I was like, no, like I'm still not okay with that. Like that's not a long-term viable solution. And then later in the argument, when things kind of got heated, she was like, well, actually, my mom just said that she'll chaperone the trip and she thinks Jeff is interesting and can't wait to meet him. And I'm like, you're obviously telling them a whole different version of what happened than me.
So he claims that this is when he steps away and he continues going up the hike because he just needed to be separate from her. At some point, I think like 5 or 10 minutes later, he does return and he was surprised to see her still there. However, her demeanor has shifted.
So she was like extremely apologetic and said, you know, basically, I'm so sorry, you're right. Like, I need to take accountability and like, let's just, you know, not ruin the day. I don't want to ruin the day. I don't want to ruin our trip. And let's keep talking about this in therapy. And she said like, you know, I won't travel with Jeff. Yeah. First she was like, again, like almost manic, like super happy, and was trying to basically, you know, get me to be in a better mood, and she was like, I'm gonna climb this tree, take pictures of me in this tree. And so she handed me her phone, and I took some pictures of her in the tree. And then after that she said, let's take a selfie by the cliff's edge.
That was her idea.
Yes.
Okay. Did you guys take one?
We did.
And what happened after that?
Right after the selfie, I just remember kind of staying at the edge there and looking over the edge and just kind of still in thought about everything that had just happened and what's going on. And then I felt like a shove,
Okay.
and I was almost pushed over the edge.
Okay. You felt a shove. Okay. Who shoved you?
Ari did.
What did you do right after that?
Barely caught myself and turned around and looked at her and was like, what the fuck was that? Like,
Okay. Turned around and it was like what like was like kind of in shock, like what the fuck was that?
yes.
Okay. And then did you move towards her?
Yeah, I did. I was like just asking her, like, you know, what was that, and started walking towards her.
Okay.
Because at this point she was like 5 or 10 feet away from me.
Why would she shove him and then move 5 or 10 feet away from him? And wouldn't she continue shoving him if she wanted to push him off the cliff? I don't know. Maybe that wasn't her intention to push him off the cliff.
Okay. So you walk towards her, and you mentioned when you're walking towards her, where were your hands?
Out.
Okay.
I'm asking her, like, what the hell's, you know, what the fuck just happened and what's going on. And as I'm starting to walk towards her, she starts yelling.
She starts yelling.
Yeah, help me, help me.
Okay.
I get to her and I'm like, touching her just putting my hands on her arms, and I was like, "What are you doing? What's going on?"
What happens then?
She keeps yelling, and she kind of grabs my wrists and throws herself on the ground and pulls me down with her.
So now you guys are on the ground?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. So you're telling me that she brings up the potential work trip. They get into argument. He blows off steam by walking away from her, comes back, and all of a sudden she's like really apologetic. And she's like, la, 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 look at me, take pictures of me. And then all of a sudden when he turns his back, she just like randomly just like shoves him and then starts doing like the Amber Heard, like help me type of thing. I don't, quite honestly, there are parts of most of his story that he's had so far from everything else sounded pretty believable, credible, right? But the red flags are starting to come up right now.
She's holding on to me, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But I'm also at this point trying to let go of, like, trying to get free because she's like actively holding on to me. Like she has her leg like wrapped around one of my legs and like is actively holding on to me and is yelling. And so I'm trying to, get free, and I get my one arm free, and I try to use it to get my other arm free. And she grabs me by the testicles, and
she grabbed your testicles. Is that right?
Yes.
How hard did she grab it?
I mean, this was
Pretty hard.
she was holding on to me by my testicles, basically, like that hard.
Okay. Did she grab it and let go, or did she grab it and hold on?
She grabbed it and held on. Then I try to free my testicles, and so I'm like thrashing with, and I get both hands free, and I'm trying to get her to let go of my testicles, and then she hits me with a rock on the side of the face.
Okay. So she's holding on to your testicles. You're kind of focused on that, obviously, and then at some point while you're focused on that, you
and it happened all really fast.
Yeah.
But
That's I'm glad you raised that up. Was this like happening slowly, where you had
it
time
all
to...
happened within probably less than a minute, maybe
Quickly.
slightly more than a minute, but 2 minutes or something.
But you weren't timing it.
From the moment that like we were on the ground and she was grabbing my testicles was like
It happened quickly.
everything after the grabbing of the testicles happened very quickly.
Okay. And you weren't timing it or anything.
No.
This is just your estimate. Okay. So now she's holding on to you. She's squeezing your testicles, and you kind of dealing with that. And she's on the ground, and you're kind of on top of her.
Yes.
Okay. And you said then you felt you got hit with a...
She kept doing it. The first blow she landed really well, and after that I was able to block fairly well. She did like land a couple more, but not as bad as the first one.
She still got your testicles?
Yeah, so she's like holding my testicle and just like hitting me like this.
And now do you stop dealing with your testicles?
Just focused on the rock at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it hurt when you got hit with the rock?
You did.
Gerhardt area?
Yes.
All right. We can take that down.
I was able to wrestle the rock out of her hand.
Does she still have your testicles?
Yes.
Still squeezing them?
Yes.
What do you do?
I was able to like. So we're like she's hitting me and I'm like blocking and then I start like, and I get
Is
her
there a
wrist.
scuffle over the rock?
Yes.
Is it near her face?
Yes. I mean it's
And then what
right.
happens?
And I finally get the rock.
What'd you do?
I hit her with the rock.
How many times do you think you hit her?
I hit her 2 times.
Okay. And when you did, was she still holding on to your testicles?
Yes.
At least initially?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you hit her? Why did you react that way?
Just on instinct to defend myself.
Okay. How fast was this all happening? Pretty fast?
Really fast.
Okay. In between when she hit you with the rock and in between the time she hit you with the rock and when you hit her with the rock, were you able to safely retreat and get away from her?
No.
Yeah. Why not?
She was holding on to me.
Including your testicles?
Yes.
Did you hit her in the face or the eye with the rock?
No.
Where you said 2 times, where did you hit her?
On the side of the head.
Okay. So we've seen these photos of the stellate laceration. you caused that by hitting her, right? Why not?
Because she stopped fighting. She let go of my testicles, and I was
Okay.
able to stand up.
And then you stopped.
Yes.
You know, there was testimony about the two witnesses. Did you stop hitting her because the witnesses showed up?
No, I didn't know that they were there until after I stood up.
Okay. Did you see blood?
Yes.
Was there a lot of blood?
There was a lot of blood.
Did you see her kind of scoot down towards the witnesses?
Yes.
Did you try to stop her in any way?
Yeah, so I just kind of reflexively gathered up all of our stuff, and then I start walking up the trail.
Let me ask you this.
Why would he go up the trail after this happened? Being in this, let's say he was injured, right? Why would you continue climbing up this dangerous hike where it gets more and more narrow? Why not just make your way down? You're already 5 minutes away from the entrance trailhead. Your car's down there. Does it kind of seem like the reason why he went up the trail was because he wanted to elude the authorities?
At this point, immediately following what just happened, you saw, you guys had this scuffle. You saw a lot of blood. What was your state of mind and emotional state like right now, right at this point that we're at?
Severe emotional distress.
How did you feel? Okay. Did you ever plan on hurting her that day?
No.
Did you ever want to hurt her that day?
No.
What did you do next? Now you're heading up the hill. What do you do next?
I just kind of kept walking up and kind of got to the same place that I had made it the last time, where the trail opens up and you're finally on the ridge, and
Were you thinking about jumping?
I'd already decided. I decided to jump, and kind of last second was made the decision to call Emil just to say goodbye.
Now, we had a lot of questions about what he's going to say about Emil, because Emil said that my dad called me, said he tried to kill her, that he was, fed up with her, she'd been cheating, and he was going to end his life. Let's see how he explains this away.
He saved my life that day.
So didn't you not to jump?
He saved my life that day, but I put him in this position where he is now, where he thinks I tried to kill her. And for the last year, he's thought that. And
I heard him yesterday only refer to you as the defendant and not as dad.
yes.
Can you blame him? Sorry, one second. You take a break.
No, I don't blame him. I had such good intentions of calling him, but
In the sense that you wanted to say goodbye.
I wanted just to say goodbye and tell him how he's an amazing person, and he should live his life to the fullest. And
Okay. Okay. Let me stop you there. Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk a little more specifics about the call. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. And so just to be clear, the place you FaceTimed him from, was that the place that the incident took place?
No.
Okay. On the FaceTime, would it have looked like you were on kind of the edge of a mountain?
Yes.
Were you on speakerphone?
Yes.
I mean, like holding it where he could see your face?
Yes.
Now,
And I showed him the view and where I was. Like,
there was testimony from police officers that it was a windy area. Do you recall it being pretty windy that day?
it was windy. Yeah, up there.
So you're on the side of a cliff, mountain. You have him on speaker on FaceTime. It's windy. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Did you tell him that Ariel had been having an affair?
I did.
Okay. Did you tell him that she got hurt, her head was bleeding?
Yeah. After he asked about the blood on my shirt.
Now, did the word "kill" come up in the conversation?
It probably did.
What do you recall explaining to him about that?
I don't recall explaining. The only thing I can think of is that I said that she said I tried to kill her.
Okay. So let's back that up.
Yeah.
So you told him that the blood was hers, yes?
Yes.
And you're telling him that you're going to jump,
And yes.
okay? And did you tell him something about, well, we're going to get to the part about the police, but you're telling him about how you're going to jump, and you were saying, you heard her say to the witnesses, he tried to kill me, okay?
Because I remember saying like, wow, this is like so hard, because it turns out killing yourself is a hard thing to do once you actually like go and do it.
Okay.
And so I was like talking to him about like saying goodbye, and she had an affair and those things. But then I was also kind of like talking to myself, and I think I was saying to myself like, she said I tried to kill her. She said I tried to kill her.
Okay. Were you confessing to him that you were trying to kill Ari that day?
No.
Okay. Did you have an intention to kill Ari that day?
No.
Okay. Would you have said it that way? I tried to kill Ari that day.
No.
Okay. But you don't dispute that the word kill probably came up.
No.
Okay. And can you understand how Emil in that conversation could have got that impression?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Emil didn't say anything about being windy and that it was maybe hard for him to hear, because quite honestly, why would Emil want to believe that his dad tried to murder Ariel, especially if they had a really good relationship? It must have been crystal clear. The fact that he said, I put Emil in a position for him to believe that I tried to kill Ariel, it's like, it sounds just really manipulative. I wonder if the jury's buying it. So again, remember, an hour later, there was a second phone call. Let's see how he explains this one.
There was a second.
Well, yeah, he said, I told them that you tried to kill Ari.
Okay. And what was your reaction to that?
I was like, why would you say that? And then,
You didn't mean that in the first call?
right.
Okay, so you're telling him why
And
did
I
you tell
didn't,
him?
at that point I was like so confused at why he would say that.
Okay. And then what did you say to him after that?
That I said, I gotta go, I gotta get off the phone.
Wouldn't your number one priority be to explain to your child and help him understand that I am not a murderer? I was not trying to explain. I wasn't trying to kill her. And let me explain to you what exactly happened. This is how it went down. She attacked me. She tried to kill me. You see how his story's just really not adding up? His actions are just not making sense. They do not align with someone who was attacked by their wife. It seems like the reason why he was like, oh, why did you say that? It was because, he started panicking that now the cops are going to be coming for him because of what the son told everyone else.
And did you say to him, because you were going to kill yourself again?
Yes.
Did you say to him,
I said, I never mind, I gotta think about this. I'm probably gonna kill myself.
okay. Did you say something to him about, I got to go so the police won't find me?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you mean by that? Why were you trying to avoid the police?
I didn't want my choice of killing myself taken away at that time until I had made the decision to either do it or not.
Now, he does mention when he does come across the police officers who took him down. Surprisingly, though, he didn't try to say that, oh, I didn't realize that they were police officers. I didn't see their badge. He said, no, I knew that there were cops and I saw the badge immediately. So that was interesting. But based on the cross-examination of the defense attorney, the questions that he was asking of the 3 law enforcement officers, it really made it seem like he was going with the angle that, hey, my client didn't know you guys were police. And it seems like 3 big men came after him because he kept emphasizing how big these guys were. Remember that, guys? They even had one of the law enforcement officers standing side by side next to his client. Wasn't that what he was going for? So maybe Gerhardt didn't realize that, or Gerhardt forgot, or maybe Gerhardt was like, you know what? I'm going to tell a lot of lies. Let me at least sprinkle in some truths that can make me look better, make me seem like I'm more, trustworthy if I'm going to admit to some things that don't make me look good.
I saw these 2 huge guys jump out of it, and they're both dressed the same, and I could see a police badge on the one.
Let me
that's
stop you there. So
closer
you knew
to
they
me.
were police?
Yeah, immediately.
Okay, and so what happens then?
Now, remember, they were unable to recover Ariel's purse, her wallet, her sunglasses, and her cell phone. Why did it disappear? Did he discard it? And if he did, why?
On your face, with the officer falling on you in that transaction or interaction?
No officer fell on me at all during the entire thing, and I did not fall on my face.
So not only is Ariel lying, but so are the 3 law enforcement officers.
Talk about Ariel's bag. Did you initially have the bag?
I did.
What'd you do? What happened to the bag?
I honestly don't remember where I left. I must have left it at some point on the mountain.
Then how come no one found it? They did a whole search team. Where was the bag on the mountain trail?
As you were
During that time.
During that time. Okay. Now, the bag that you had on,
Yes.
on the hike, did you see the big blood stain on the back of your shirt?
Yes.
What was that from?
It's from the bag
Okay,
that I was.
Explain that.
So during the scuffle, my bag, I was holding both bags. I put both bags down to take the selfie, and I had both bags again.
Why did you have her bag?
Because she had given it to me when she was climbing up on the tree. And then
The scuffle happened.
the scuffle happens, and my bag both bags, went flying basically, but my bag must have been right by her head, because after she left, when I picked my bag up, there was a bunch of blood on the back of it.
And then you put the bag on your back, and that's
Yes.
how the blood got on your shirt?
Yes.
Okay.
Both bags went flying, and Ariel's bag was the one that coincidentally just flew over the cliff. Got it. But his bag, he was able to, place it right by next to her head, or maybe that's where his bag surprisingly somehow magically landed there. You know what? I still can't go over the fact that Ariel, we didn't see any patterns of her being unhinged, because again, that's what I'm looking for, right? Patterns of behavior where she's crazy, unhinged, and there's been fights with them before where there was like altercations, physical ones. You're telling me the first physical altercation with Ariel is because she mentions that, it's her affair, by the way. She mentions that like, oh, hey, I have to do a work trip, and he wasn't okay with that. And that she got mad. He disappears. He comes back, and she pretends to be all smiley, happy. And then whack, out of nowhere, she decides to push him. And then boom, out of nowhere, she decides to fight him, grab his testicles, and smash his head with a rock. Like, she just suddenly just became really unhinged that day. If she was the one who found out that he was having an affair for the first time, maybe I could see someone reacting as crazy like that, right? But it just doesn't make sense. It's not adding up for me.
Now, your work bag. You're an anesthesiologist, correct?
Yes.
And you, that work bag was always on Maui, is that right?
That's correct. That's the bag that I use in the operating room every day, and I have medications in it that I use for work. Most of the medications that are in there are used for emergencies when I'm on call.
Okay, let me ask you about that. When you're on call, do you sometimes you're at home and you have to rush in to a different, is it always the same location?
Yeah, so when we're on call, we're always on call for the hospital. So
Okay.
I work at several locations, but all of the call shifts are for the hospital, really close to my house, and so I can take call from home. Oftentimes I'm in scrubs already, and I have this work bag either right by the door or in the car.
I don't know how it would feel if my anesthesiologist was carrying the vials and meds with him. What if someone else tampered it and fuck with it? I thought there was like a check-in, check-out system where there's like a locker in the hospital where the meds are all kept, whether they're substance controlled or not. And whenever someone takes one, there's like a log of that. So for him to just like be carrying it with him on person while he's working at hospitals, that to me sounds odd, but I don't know. Maybe that is normal. But again, what if someone decides to fuck with your vials and mess with it? Don't they have to be kept away in a very safe place? I don't know.
I believe in the right to self-defense, right? But I mean, in the moment, it was kind of an impulse. It wasn't like a conscious, like, I'm going to analyze this from like a legal perspective. It was, but yet the result of it was harm to my wife.
Okay. How do you feel about that? That she's got hurt.
Horrible.
You've learned that she is filing for divorce and seeking full custody of your children. Yes.
Yes.
Do you want joint custody?
Yes. More than any. That's
Okay. And there's been testimony that you've been in custody. Yes.
yes.
Gerhardt, did you have a plan to kill your wife on the mountain that day?
No.
Did you try to throw her off a cliff?
No.
Did you try to stab her with syringes?
No.
When you hit her with the rock twice, why did you do it?
In self-defense.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Gerhardt, can we take a cross-examination tomorrow morning? Can we approach? Yeah.
Cross-examination. Oh man. So we find out that Gerhardt made about $300,000 to $400,000. Ariel made less than $200,000 a year. That they did purchase round trip tickets, so there was, at least some sort of a intention of coming back from Oahu or the illusion of it. They're gonna go through the affair and how he would look through his emails, of course, with her consent, but he wanted to know who she was writing to, if he can see. The prosecution again is going to minimize, the affair by saying that like, oh, these are messages where they're saying good morning to each other. There's nothing sexual. So what are you like upset about good mornings? And Gerhardt is like, no, it's not just them saying good morning to each other. What is the context of it? Like the whole thing, the entirety of the conversation, they're keeping it a secret. They are really, chatting it up throughout the entire day. And as a married person, this made me feel very uncomfortable. He did mention that he was kind of upset that Ariel was talking about her personal life, how Ariel was sharing about what the kids were doing and how like, oh, look, the kids are putting stuff up on the Christmas tree. Now, there was talk about Ariel moving out of the house, Ariel quitting his job, and the state prosecution was really trying to make it seem like, well, were you doing it because you wanted Ariel to be dependent on you? Did you want Ariel to have no one else to turn to and just have you as her source? But I mean, him giving the explanation that like, no, like, I wanted her to find a new job because of this affair thing. I think it's a reasonable explanation. So I think that's the issue that the jury might have with this defendant. To me, I see a lot of red flags, right? However, to some people, they might be like, well, if there's aren't any like blatant lies or, very obvious, like this guy's like a piece of shit, then maybe they will give him a lot of benefit of the doubt, right? Which is, I think it's going to give people a benefit of the doubt. But for me, I'm like, no, I see way too many red flags. Like I see a manipulator. I see someone who's a very sophisticated liar. And then let's get into I think the state tried to bring up that, I think there's an objection though. So I'm trying to figure out what was also brought up. That he had like needs, okay, that it sort of came up, but there was an objection where he would say that he wanted to like demand sex from Ariel like every other day before the affair happened. But after the end of December, they were no longer sleeping with each other.
After you confronted Ariel about this affair, you wanted her to meet your physical needs, correct?
I wouldn't characterize it like that.
You wouldn't characterize it as Ariel being unwilling to meet your physical needs? Would you?
I would characterize that I was in a relationship with Ariel for 8 years, and we had a physical relationship, and I had physical needs as part of that physical relationship prior to me finding out about the affair, and I had physical needs after the affair as well.
Okay. And she's a regular. We're talking about sex here, right, doctor?
No, I'm talking about physical intimacy with the person that I love the most, which includes sexual and non-sexual intimacy.
But you see, they were trying to characterize it as he was like demanding for her to have sex with him. And then if she didn't comply, then he would threaten to tell family members and friends about the affair because she wasn't, whenever she would do that, it would be seen as her like withdrawing from him. But I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of convolutions there. And maybe it's a he said, she said, where to one person they thought it this way and to the other person they meant it this way. Or maybe Gerhardt was a piece of shit and he demanded physical sex from her and then threatened her when he didn't get it. This one I'm kind of like, I don't know if I super buy it 100%, but it's there. It's out there. And when I say I don't buy, it doesn't mean that I'm calling Ariel a liar, but I'm saying there's not enough in the trial so far that's convinced me of this. Oh, remember the email that he wrote to Andrea Miller, so Jeff Miller's wife? By the way, I wonder what she thinks about this whole thing because this trial is happening and people must be like, yo, your husband is on this trial. Jeff Miller's brought up and oh my gosh, this is crazy. Anyways, Andrea Miller never replied to his email, never replied to his friend requests on LinkedIn. The state is going to go through and recap his computer activity, how he was going through his old divorce filings, trying to figure out how much money he had to pay for child support, alimony, going through Ariel's retirement account, going through, how Ariel's school was paid by the benefits of him working at Pittsburgh, going through how, like maybe it's like thinking like, oh, I helped pay for Ariel's tuition because of my benefit at Pittsburgh. How dare she repay me by cheating on me? Him going through all the Reddit stuff. And, I think a lot of people can kind of sympathize with him. Like, oh, this is a man who was, felt like he was being cheated on. And he's going through everything and kind of like doubting his marriage. But it could also be seen as another way that like, oh, he's really ruminating and maybe he is planning on murdering his wife.
You also said that she needed to be okay with giving up her privacy. Is that right?
That's right.
That's what you wanted, right?
That's what I wanted.
She didn't end up doing that, did she?
No.
And that upset you.
Although she did do it. She did do it initially. She did it in San Luis Obispo, and she did it for a very short period of time in Maui, and then sporadically again in December. And honestly, she changed her behavior. So in January, February, March, she was not like, I didn't feel like she was hiding her phone from me anymore. I didn't feel, and I knew her passcode hadn't changed. So she was doing a lot of those things.
You knew her passcode hadn't changed, right? You just said that.
That's right.
The only way to know that is by testing it, right?
No, you could also see them put in their passcode. And when somebody's sitting next to you and they're not hiding their phone, you can easily see who they're writing, what they're saying. You can easily see their passcode. And if somebody's not worried about sharing the passcode with the person sitting next to them, you're basically showing it to them, and that's what's going on.
So now another thing you mentioned yesterday is that you believed the cheating spouse needs to put in the work, right?
That's not what I said.
You testified that the cheating spouse needs to put in the work, right? You said that.
I wouldn't characterize it like that. I would not say the work. The way you're making it sound is like there's only one work to be done. The work that needs to be done to heal a relationship after any kind of issue like this involves both parties. And I was talking specifically about the part that the cheating spouse has to commit to doing. I was not saying that was the only work that needed to be done, like you're implying.
Dr. Konig, if we could not go into anything implied, I'm just asking you a question, okay? I'm asking you what you said.
Your Honor, he's trying to answer the questions. Should be allowed to answer.
It's non-responsive.
That was not question. He's asking questions. He's answering.
Is there an objection?
My objection is to him reprimanding the witness when all he's doing is answering the question. So that's my objection.
Also, him going through the spreadsheets with like the weddings and how much their wedding costs. Again, there's a lot of like, I don't recall. He's like, oh, I don't recall doing that. I don't recall doing that. It could be seen as like, oh, he's being evasive and he doesn't want to admit that he was looking through these folders, these files. Or some people might be like, well, it was a long time ago. So, if you're specifically asking like, hey, on December 31st, did you open your divorce hearing spreadsheet? And you say you don't recall. It could be like, well, generally, it was a long time ago to recall. But the defense does have a very interesting explanation for this, which, oh, did they go through that yet? Oh, no, they haven't. We'll get there. Anyways, so let's talk about the hike. Let's talk about the cross-examination and, maybe some of the inconsistencies that the state is going to point out.
You booked the hotel for the weekend trip, correct?
I did.
You sent spa information to Ariel before the trip, right?
Yes.
And then you booked the spa, correct?
Yes.
You did not send Ariel electronically any information about the Palipuka hike, isn't that correct?
I don't think I did.
You remember reading the part that says that the hike spits you out on the edge of a cliff with a huge drop-off, where it says, be safe going down and take it slow, as it can be slippery and the drop looks very unforgiving.
Yes.
You read that, right?
Yes.
Let's publish States Exhibit 98. Can you see the vial on the bottom right of this? The trade name of this drug is called Diprivan, is that correct?
That's correct.
The actual name of the drug, or the scientific name, is called propofol, correct?
That's correct.
Propofol is one of the main drugs that is actually, I'll use a non-scientific word, puts you to sleep during anesthesia, correct?
It's a very common drug that we use to initiate and sometimes maintain anesthesia.
Propofol is...
Yes.
Propofol is the drug that killed Michael Jackson, is that right?
That's right.
You've heard of that story, of course?
Yes.
Okay. It is not a controlled substance, that's correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you actually have a controlled substance license yourself, too, right?
I do.
So you can carry more dangerous drugs than propofol, correct?
Yeah, I don't think I can. I think because my controlled substance license doesn't allow me to dispense; it just allows me to administer. And so all of our controlled substances are controlled at all of the locations where we work. And so we have to check them out and check them back in, and then document all of the vials that we used during the day. I've never taken controlled substances home. I would never. It's not something I want to get into. So I don't even know if it's allowed under my license. But I can administer it.
But Ariel didn't go that far on the trail that day, did she?
No.
So Ariel didn't want to hike anymore, right?
Yeah, there came a point in time where Ariel did not want to hike anymore.
Ariel deviated from your plan to go up this part of the trail, right?
I wouldn't characterize it like that.
Well, you planned to go up this part of the trail, correct?
That's correct.
And Ariel didn't follow through with that part of the plan, right?
Yeah.
You testified that Ariel pushed you, right?
Yes.
And you testified that you could barely hold on, right?
I almost went off the cliff.
And then you turned around and you testified that Ariel was 5 to 10 feet away, right?
By the time I turned around, she had backed away, and she was not. And yeah, that was part of why I was concerned that that was a shove and not an accidental thing.
And then you approached her. You went towards her.
I did.
So you think you about to get pushed off a cliff, and then you go 5 or 10 feet to get to Ariel, right?
I moved towards her. That's correct.
And then you say that Ariel pulled you onto the ground, right?
That's correct.
You're bigger than Ariel, right?
Yes.
You have at least, or at the time of the offense, or at the time of the incident, you had at least 20 pounds on her, right?
Yeah, roughly 20 pounds.
You're stronger than her, right?
Probably.
You're a doctor, so you know that men generally are stronger than women, correct?
Yes.
It's just a scientific matter of testosterone, right?
That's true.
But you testify that Ariel managed to pull you to the ground, and she pulled you on top of her, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Then you testified that Ariel wouldn't let you go from on top of her, right?
That's correct.
You testified that she wrapped her legs around you, right?
She wrapped at least one leg around me, yes.
Yesterday you said legs, right?
I think I said leg. It was at least one.
And you testified that she grabbed your testicles, right?
She did.
And that she wouldn't let go, right?
That's right.
And then you testified that Ariel took that rock. I'm going to grab Exhibit 2 right now. You testified that Ariel took this rock and hit you in the face. Isn't that right?
That's right.
And you said, the first hit, she got me kind of good, right?
That's right.
And you said she kept trying, right?
That's right.
And you testified you tried to start blocking it, right?
Yes.
And you testified she actually got a couple more hits in, right?
Yes.
So, but you don't know how many hits, right?
No.
One good hit to the side of your face, correct?
That's right.
This is a photo of you from March 24th, 2025, correct?
That's right.
This is immediately after the police arrested you, right?
That's right.
This is the closest photo of you after Ariel hit you with this rock, right?
That's right.
Okay, so on the right side, we have you after Ariel got one good hit with you with the rock, right?
That's right.
And on the right side, we have you after Ariel kept hitting you with the rock and got a couple other less good hits. Is that right?
That's right.
On the left side of the screen, you testified that you hit Ariel 2 times, right?
That's correct.
So that's a good point. He claims Ariel had one good hit with the rock on the side of his head. However, when he hit Ariel twice, she was like squirming around, couldn't really get a good hit, I guess. But the comparison and injuries are just vastly, vastly different.
On the left side of the screen, we have the results that you say you hit her only 2 times, correct?
That's correct.
You at the hospital on the night of March 24th, 2025, correct?
That's correct.
This is you at the hospital after Ariel got a good hit on you.
That's right.
This is Ariel at the hospital after your... This is Ariel's hand after those... This is the front of Ariel's face after those 2 hits, right?
Yes.
Which exhibit?
States 22.
Thank you.
Put up States 27. This is Ariel's hand after those... This is Ariel's hand after those 2 hits, right?
Yes.
And lastly, we'll put up on the left side states. On the left side of the screen, that's Ariel on March 25th, 2025, correct?
I don't know when that picture was taken, but I'll take your word for it.
That's Ariel the day afterwards, right?
Like I said, I don't know when that picture was taken, but I'll take your word for it.
We'll flip it upside correctly. And this is you, again, correct?
Yes.
This is you on March 25th, 2025, right?
I think that was like the night of, like just after midnight, but it was after the previous picture. That's right.
Oh my gosh, what happened to the bruising? What happened to all the scuff on his ear? He just healed miraculously that quickly within 24, 30 hours? That's crazy. Now I'm thinking, it really does seem like the scuff that he had was really from the law enforcement officers like landing on top of him when he was trying to escape them. And it probably was dirt all over his face. I see a little bit of like tiny green here, but barely. And his ear doesn't, it really doesn't look bad. Let me zoom in for you guys, okay? Take a look.
This is you one day after Ariel hit you really good with this rock, isn't it?
That's right.
Oh boy, that is how he ends his cross-examination. Now, the cross-examination, the original one, is way longer because they really get into the details of all of his internet searches, okay, the documents that he was looking at. So I highly recommend, if you guys have time, watch his full testimony, watch the cross-examination. Now, after this, the state's like, I don't have any further questions. Yeah. So let's go over to Gerhardt's attorney, Mr. Otake. Let's see what he does in redirect. Will he be able to rehabilitate? Or maybe there wasn't a lot of damage done by the state prosecution. Maybe that's what some of the jurors think.
All these financial documents they brought up, were you trying to see if it would be cheaper to kill her than divorce her?
No.
It was pretty short. It wasn't that much. Let's go back to recross with the state.
If Ariel divorces you, if she divorces you, you're likely the one that's going to be paying child support. That's correct?
If we ended up getting a divorce, I would be paying child support, correct?
If Ariel ends up divorcing you, you don't get anything from her life insurance, correct?
If Ariel, if we get divorced, neither one of us gets either one of our life insurances.
Ariel divorces you, you don't get any of her retirement accounts, correct?
If we get divorced, well, that's not true. No, if we get divorced, Ariel might get some of my retirement account because my retirement account is much bigger than hers.
The question was, if Ariel divorces you, you do not get her retirement account, correct?
This is a question of law. It's not. That's overruled.
I know that the retirement accounts are going to be. I know that retirement account division is part of divorce, and I know that there's a lot of things that go into that calculation. I know that my retirement account is much bigger than her retirement account, and I'm not sure what portions we'll be able to keep because it's based on when the contributions were made and things like that.
You know that you're likely not going to be taking her retirement if she divorces you, correct?
Like I said, I don't know what's going to come of all that. It's a complicated.
Second scenario, if Ari dies, you don't pay any child support, correct?
If Ari dies, if Ari died when?
If Ariel Konig dies, you're not going to be paying her any child support, correct?
If Ari dies, and yes, I would not be paying a dead person child support. Yes.
If Ariel dies, you get the $250,000 life insurance policy she took out, correct?
Yes.
That your suggestion, correct?
Not my suggestion to take out the life insurance policy. It was a joint decision.
If Ariel dies, you get $250,000 from her retirement, correct?
Yes.
As the sole beneficiary, correct?
Yes.
If Ariel dies, you get full custody of the kids, right?
If Ariel dies, I'm the only parent left. Yes.
No further questions.
During that time period, you decided to take out $1.5 million of life insurance on your life for her, right?
Yes.
You had more retirement than her?
Yes.
And if you died, that would go to her.
Yes.
So again, they're trying to feed to the jury that, oh, Ariel could have had motive to kill you.
Did you pay child support?
Yes.
Did you feel it was the right thing to do?
Yes.
Did you want to do that for your kids?
Yes.
If you and Ari got divorced, would you be willing to pay child support?
Yes. Absolutely.
Would you do financially whatever you needed to do to make sure your kids had a good life?
Yes.
That was the end of his testimony. Now, my impressions of Gerhardt, I think for a defendant to be testifying on the stand, he's probably one of the best defendants that I've seen in almost any case that we've been watching. The murder cases, some civil trial cases. I think he did pretty decently well on the stand. However, you know, there were some red flags that I was picking out throughout his story, especially when he was describing how things went down between him and Ariel and how Ariel attacked him. And then he started stuttering. And it just really seemed like he, had it, he didn't feel like he was living from memory, it looked like he was trying to recreate, but that was just my general feeling. I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about Gerhardt. Were you guys like, no, this guy's lying. I hate him. He's horrible. I think he's well trained. That, and I mean, he probably, works with a lot of, well, actually, no, he's an anesthesiologist. I was like, I don't think he has a lot of face-to-face time with patients. Also, I do want to say this. I felt like he didn't overplay his cards. He wasn't overly dramatic, theatric, with sometimes when you see defendants testify in the stand, they do too much. And when they're doing too much, it really feels like they're trying to manipulate the jurors. And it comes off as ingenuine, I would say. I think he did a pretty decent job. And do I believe him, though? I believe that, he was angry, upset, sad about this, affair. And I'm calling it a fucking affair, because there's emotional affair. There's texty, flirty affair, right? And if I found out my significant other was doing that, I wouldn't be happy either. I'd be like, what the fuck is this? Well, that's kind of fucking weird, But with Gerhardt, I think the jurors can sympathize for him going through this. They just had a 1-year-old child and she's over here, text blasting her coworker. And then he felt like, the South Africa trip that she took, maybe she wasn't being very honest about it. And I could see how he could have spiraled into thinking that they had a physical affair. Now, when it came down to all the other stuff that he was looking at, like the divorce, the research and all that, I mean, quite honestly, he kept saying oh, I don't recall. I don't recall that I accessed these files. I don't recall. And I think I don't know, maybe he should just own up to it. Be like, yeah, I was going through an affair and I considered divorcing her, but I'm not going to kill her. Of course not. That's the mother of my child. So we are going to bring back Detective Enuma. And the reason why, it's because Detective Enuma is going to come back and he's going to essentially say that the files that were accessed on Gerhardt's computer, it seems like it was a human that probably accessed it instead of a operating system. Because I think when Gerhardt was testifying, he was really trying to push this narrative that, oh, well, the computer must have just opened the file. I didn't have access to it. I didn't open it. And so if you guys are confused about how computers can open the files, or how it says last time file was open, modified, manipulated, or something like that, it seems like Gerhardt was trying to say that oh, it was my computer that did that, not me, because I don't remember opening all these files. So let's bring back Detective Enuma and listen to his testimony.
And isn't it true, Detective, computer operating systems like Windows, all of those can access files, a computer can access a file doing those things without any human clicking on or viewing the file, correct?
Yes.
And when a computer accesses files that way,
Yes.
for example, operating system processes sometimes access files, yes?
Yes.
Search indexing functions on a computer can access files, yes?
Yes.
Antivirus or security scans can access files, yes?
Yes.
Backup or sync programs can access files, yes?
Yes.
All of those can access files. A computer can access a file doing those things without any human clicking on or viewing the file, correct?
Yes.
And when a computer accesses files that way, it will often update the last access time, yes?
Yes.
Even though it was not a human that accessed the file, correct?
Yes.
That's Attorney Otake, the defense attorney, asking the detective these questions. So what I'm thinking at this point, I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the dates when they were all accessed, right? Let's look at the time. Because if these files were accessed by for example, an antivirus security scanner, Well, the last access could possibly be, for most of these files, could be the same date and the same time, because they're all being done pretty quickly, right? Or like very similar times that are close to each other. Or, you know, from what I've remembered, I thought the dates were kind of like all over the place, and I thought the times, maybe they didn't really specify. No, I think there were times on there. Yeah, I think they were all different. Okay, well, let's see what the state says.
Now, based on the fact that there are multiple different dates where all these different files, the financials, the divorce documents, where all these were accessed, what does that tell you about whether this was a virus scan or a person?
Okay, so how, using the Axiom software, if it's a case that's involved, if it's important to last access time, the file created date time or the modified date time, what I usually do is I look at the metadata. The metadata is data about the data. So for example, for photos or videos, right, it contains data such as created date time. It also have a modified date time. It's going to also show the last access time. It's going to contain GPS location data and the make and model of the device that was used to capture. For files, it's going to contain basically the same thing. Might not have the GPS location data, but it might contain the author's name. Last access, I noticed that all the dates and the date and time that was accessed were all different. It'll be a strong indication if all the access time were all within the same date, the same time, within milliseconds. If it shows that there was over 50 files that were accessed at the same second, then that would be a strong indicator that there was some kind of automated software that accessed all of them, and it's humanly impossible to open up 50 files within a second.
Okay, so let's focus on the files from the defendant's folder that we talked about last week about divorce. Those files were accessed between December 2024 and February 2025, is that right?
Yes.
On at least 4 different days, correct?
Yes.
And what does that tell you about whether it's human access or antivirus software or automatic access?
Okay, so just based on the limited data that I received, it appears that it was likely a human action that caused it, because if the antivirus software went into that folder, it's going to do a sweep of all the files within that folder. It's not going to just individually pick one file for that day, come back a couple days later, look for another file, and so on.
And for all of us who have antivirus scanners, or, I used to do this a lot back in the day, you could choose specific folders to scan, or you could scan the entire computer, right? If you scan the entire computer, it's not going to just be like, oh, well, let me scan this one document in this folder. It's just going to do it either by folders or, by whatever you designate it by. So I think I'm going to buy Detective Enuma's story about this, and Gerhardt pushing back saying like, oh yeah, I don't remember accessing these files. Like, oh, it could have been my computer, it could have been my virus scanner. Yeah, I think the detective did a really good job at kind of combating that. Oh, but if I was the defense though, I would ask Detective Enuma that, oh, isn't it possible you might not be humanly clicking each file and opening them all at the same time, but what if you kind of like did like a control all and then did like an open all type of function? Couldn't you have done that instead of humanly clicking each one? I don't know. That came to my mind. All right. Guess what, guys? The defense has rest their case. No more other witnesses. The state is not going to put on a rebuttal. So we're going to go directly into closing arguments. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight some of the best portions of closing arguments and some of the worst too. So closing arguments is going to start with Attorney Joel. And I think... Actually, I don't want to preface it for you guys, but we're going to listen from Attorney Joel, and then we'll listen to Attorney Otake. I wonder what you guys are thinking right now, because I wonder if, like, closing arguments, how effective are they? I wonder if they're, like, members of the jury who are like, you know what, I'm pretty persuaded, but, like, I don't know if I could really put everything, like, together, right? Like, in like, a full, like, kind of, like, scenario. How powerful are closing arguments when attorneys are the ones that kind of like, hey, remind you like, oh, don't forget this happened. Don't forget that happened. Don't forget about this evidence. And, isn't it kind of weird that this happened and then you're comparing to this right here? Like, I don't know. I wonder how much emphasis closing arguments has for the jurors. I don't know. What do you guys think?
A motive, a beating, a confession. Ladies and gentlemen, beyond a reasonable doubt, the state has proven that on March 24th, 2025, Gerhardt Konig tried to kill his wife, Ariel. The state has proven beyond reasonable doubt that Gerhardt Konig committed the offense of attempted murder in the 2nd degree. There are 2 elements, as Judge read you a couple minutes ago. Element number 1, on or about March 24th, 2025, that if in the city and county of Honolulu, the defendant intentionally engaged in conduct. Starting with element 1, what is the conduct? What did defendant do? First, he tried to push her. The second, the syringe. He tried to inject her with an unknown substance. And third, the beating with the rock. That is the conduct that defendant engaged in intentionally. The second element, that conduct, under the circumstances under which defendant believed them to be, was a substantial step in a course of conduct intended or known to be practically certain by the defendant to cause the death of Ariel Konig. So element number one, simple, it's conduct. Element number two defines what that conduct is, what it's meant to do. And the conduct in this case was meant to kill. The intent behind each one, plan A, the push, the intent was to kill. When plan A didn't work, the defendant moved on to plan B. Plan B, inject her with the syringe, knock her out, push her off the cliff. The intent behind plan B was to kill. Plan C, when the first two plans didn't work, beat her with the rock, knock her out, drag her over, or just simply kill her outright. The intent behind every single plan was to kill Ariel. Every plan, every backup plan ends in Ariel's death. That shows he's committed to killing Ariel. The first time you get that is with the push. When the defendant takes his hands, tells Ariel, I'm sick of this shit, and tries to push her back off the cliff. That is the first substantial step the defendant took. That didn't work. Ariel went to the ground. Ariel protected herself. The defendant took the next substantial step. He took that syringe out, and he tried to inject her. But Ariel fought back. Ariel fought back, fighting for her life, knocks the syringe away, and then the defendant moves on to plan C, his third substantial step, where he takes that rock, this rock right here, the same rock that you've all held, he takes this rock and he beats her with it again and again and again and again. The severity of Ariel's injuries, you'll hear many times trying to minimize them. That is not a defense. The law treats somebody the same, whether they're successful or not. The law treats you the same no matter how good you are at executing that plan, no matter how good you are at actually succeeding in killing somebody. The law treats you the same. As an example, somebody who tries to shoot somebody, who points a gun and tries to end a life, but misses, they've committed attempted murder the same way the defendant committed, in a similar way, in a similar idea as the way the defendant did it in this case. You cannot look only at the results to determine intent. You have to look at everything together. And when you look at everything, it shows one clear answer beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's that the defendant intended to kill her. Ariel testified in a straightforward, coherent manner. She testified clearly. There were no histrionics, barely any tears. It was straightforward. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. It was not over-dramatized. It was not over-exaggerated. It was straightforward and simple and coherent. What this means, simply, is corroboration. What level of corroboration is there? There is a lot. Ariel is corroborated by the physical evidence, the scene and location, the rock, the blood evidence, the injuries, the medical supplies. Ariel is corroborated by the digital forensics. What was going on the defendant's computer corroborates what Ariel said. Ariel is corroborated by the other witnesses. You've held the rock. You've seen it. You know how much it weighs. You know how sharp it can be on the sides. You've seen the photos of Ariel's blood and Ariel's hair on that rock. The rock corroborates what Ariel said. The blood on the rock. The blood on the samples from the trail. The blood all over defendant's shirt and shorts. Every single one had a likely ratio of over 1 trillion for Ariel. Reason and common sense tells you all of that blood is Ariel Konig's, not the defendant's. Second, Ariel Konig's DNA was on both sides of the rock. And think back. Think back to how Ariel demonstrated what she did. She held up her hand. She held up her hand trying to block the defendant. She suffered defensive injuries from it on her fingers, on her thumb, and that's how her DNA is on that rock. Because she touched it. Her touch DNA is on the rock because she touched that rock to try and stop the defendant. Well, he's a doctor, he can get this stuff. No, he had actual possession of syringes, he had actual possession of vials, he had actual possession of drugs that can kill. This isn't some, he could have gotten them, he had them. This corroborates Ariel's testimony. And more importantly, these drugs weren't stored in a controlled environment. They were stored in his home, where he had access. He could take them, didn't have to log them or anything, just remove them from his home and do whatever he wanted with them. Grossstein told you, there was debris throughout the entire injury. There were rocks. The defendant swung this rock so hard that pieces of rock broke off into Ariel's scalp. You've seen the photo of Ariel from the front. You've seen what's missing from her head. You've seen that there is a chunk of her scalp that is gone. It's right there in that photo. And you've seen that she didn't just have scalp injuries. She had injuries above her eye. She had injuries below her eye. She had injuries to her hand, not even to just her thumb. Her thumb was only where there was a break. The digital evidence tells you what defendant was thinking, what he was thinking from December 2024 to March 2025. It shows you, that first of all, it confirms the motive. It confirms the strong motive defendant had to kill because he was looking up infidelity. He was looking up Ariel's financials. He was looking up his prior divorce. He was going into Ariel's hard drive to look up documents. The second thing that the digital forensic shows, most importantly, it shows defendant's familiarity with that hike. It shows you what the defendant looked at before deciding the Polypuka Trail is the hike that he should be taking Ariel on. It showed the defendant this picture right here. It showed that the defendant was only interested in difficult hikes. Easy hikes were not for him. The defendant wanted difficult hikes. He knew that this trail was not popular from his research. He knew that 99% of the people wouldn't be going on this trail. She had no idea what kind of trail she was getting into that day. Immediately after the defendant did this, they showed you that. They showed you the closest thing to what the defendant last saw Ariel as. And they even caught it on their body cam. They even caught Ariel's condition as she states her name.
Gerhardt Konig, Gerhardt. Birthday is March 24th, 1989.
You heard Ariel testify for hours, but also you heard in this video her slurred voice, her heavy breathing, her condition after the defendant beat her with that rock. She was not okay. The defendant tried to flee into the woods. It took a total of 835 pounds of HPD officers to subdue the defendant. That's how much he was resisting. He knew they were police. They identified themselves as police. And as Officer Nicola testified, the defendant, in his attempt to get away, fell on his face, and then Officer Nicola fell on top of him. That's why you see the grass on the defendant's head. That's why you see the dirt on the left side of the defendant's face, because that's where he hit the ground. That's where he hit the ground while he was being arrested. He fled the scene. Second, he collected the evidence from the scene. He collected Ariel's phone. He collected Ariel's purse. And he collected those syringes. He took all those items from the scene, and he disposed of them. Ariel's mom still tried to ping her phone, and it was up at the Poly hours later. But they could never find it. And think back, where the police, where Doe Care couldn't search. They couldn't search the bottom of the cliff. They couldn't get down that way. They searched the whole mountainside, couldn't find it. But the bottom of that cliff that's several hundred feet tall, that's where they couldn't search. Defendant confessed. Defendant called Emil just minutes. But ladies and gentlemen, after listening to the defendant's testimony, you only need one word to summarize it. One word. Unbelievable. The defendant's story. She started an argument. The defendant's story is that somehow Ariel, on her birthday, on an unfamiliar hike next to a massive cliff, decided to start an argument. Does that make sense to you? No. Ariel decided somehow to start an argument about she said she wanted to go back and continue to work with Jeff Miller. She wants to travel with Jeff Miller. Does that make sense that Ariel would bring this up on that cliffside? No. It contradicts common sense. It even contradicts the defendant's own testimony where he told you they don't talk about this outside of counseling. The defendant told you that, and that's what worked for them. And somehow Ariel's bringing it up, ruining her birthday on a hike. Ladies and gentlemen, it's unbelievable. The defendant's story, she pushed me. The defendant says he felt a hard push from behind, that he was looking out over the cliff. He barely holds himself on. He turns around, and Ariel's already 5 to 10 feet away. Ladies and gentlemen, unbelievable. Ariel was trying to push him off that cliff. She wouldn't be that far away. She would have been right behind him, trying to push him again. Defendant's story, she pulled me down on top of her. Think about how that makes sense. Defendant's story is that then he approached Ariel, that he grabbed her arms, and Ariel somehow responded by pulling him down on top of her and not letting him go. Defendant's bigger than her. Defendant's stronger than her. Ask yourself, what person would hold a bigger, stronger person on top of them as an act of aggression? It doesn't make sense. It's unbelievable. Defendant's story, she hit me first. Somehow while Ariel's sitting down, or while Ariel's underneath him, while he's in the position of power, while he's on top of her, the story is that Ariel held him down so he couldn't escape, grabbed his genitals, wrapped her legs around him, and then she picks up a rock and hits him in the face.
And if Ariel was on her back, how did she know where her rock was? If you're fighting with someone, usually you are focused on what's in front of you. That would mean that she had to somehow know that there was a rock on the side of her head to pick it up and use it to bash Gerhardt with. What makes sense would be if he was on top of her, and because he's visually looking down at her face and where the ground is and sees the rock next to her face, it makes sense that he would be the one that picks up the rock and uses it to bash her.
This is the photo of the defendant almost 8 hours after the incident up on the trail, after the defendant tried to kill Ariel. Yes. There's a small dark spot on his cheek. Is it a bruise? Is it dirt? I don't know. This is Ariel. The idea that this same rock caused these different injuries is unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. The idea that Ariel could hit him really good, and that's it, it's unbelievable. This is the defendant at the hospital that night, and this is Ariel at the hospital on the same day. Look at the defendant 1 day later. There's nothing. There's no more. Ariel's got her head wrapped up. She's still got these injuries on her eye. The defendant's story is filled with contradictions. The defendant is contradicted by Amanda and Sarah. Somehow, Ariel finally let go of his private parts, and then he just stands there and looks. He's not on the ground writhing in pain? Does that make sense? He says that she held on so hard that he couldn't escape. Does it make sense that afterwards he would just stand there and stare? No. He's even contradicted by his own hired doctor. The defendant told you he hit her twice. No more. But even his own doctor said 2 to 3 hits to the scalp. Hits to the face. Hits to the fingers. So even the defendant's own witness shows that he hit her more than twice. He hit her, add them all up, 4, 5, 6, could be any of those times. He told you he removed his SIM card with a paperclip. Well, state 72 through state 86, that's all the photos. That's all the contents of defendant's backpack. Where is that paperclip? He could have just as easily used that syringe. Open his SIM card, dispose of the syringe. Hiding evidence 2 ways at once. The substantial step again. He made the plan. You have gotten instructions about self-defense. It should be clear. The defendant was using deadly force in this case. This rock is known to the defendant to cause death or serious bodily injury. You don't need to be a doctor, although he is. He's actually treated patients who've had rocks fall on them, so the defendant is well aware of the damage that he was doing. He's more than aware because it was his intent. It was his intent to cause that damage. It was his intent to cause death. Self-defense doesn't apply. Or self-defense does apply, but defendant cannot claim it because he was the initial aggressor. He was the one who started the physical altercation. He was the one who used deadly force. And lastly, he had a duty to retreat. When using deadly force, before you use that deadly force, the law states you have a duty to retreat. And the defendant didn't do that.
Incomplete statement on the law.
Objection overruled. Ladies and gentlemen, the court instructed you on what the applicable law is. You need to follow the court's instructions as read out to you and as it's provided in the jury instructions that you have.
There's no evidence that the defendant was acting under extreme mental or emotional disturbance when he tried to kill Ariel. Don't be confused by his testimony. He did say he was under severe emotional distress, but he said that after he tried to kill Ariel. He said he was under severe emotional distress after he started to think about how this would affect his job, how this would affect his life. He was under severe emotional distress after he began to think about the consequences of his actions and how his actions would affect himself. And the second part of that instruction states that the defendant's self-control, the defendant's logical thinking is important here. It shows the defendant, when plan A didn't work, he moved to plan B. When plan B didn't work, he moved to plan C. And when he got caught, he fled the scene, he hid the evidence, and he hid himself. That shows the defendant was using logical thinking. The defendant was solving problems as they came. He was not acting under extreme mental or emotional disturbance. Motive of beating and a confession. You've seen through this trial the defendant's motive. He was upset. He was angry. Wherever he turned, Ariel wasn't being punished. First, he talks to Ariel's best friend, tries to air the dirty laundry. But the best friend stays on Ariel's side. Deanna stays on Ariel's side. She's not punished. Then he emails Andrea Miller, giving this other woman Ariel's personal contact information, her cell number, her personal email. But Andrea Miller never responds. Ariel's not punished. And then he goes to counseling. They go to marriage counseling. And instead of focusing on the affair, what do they focus on? These intimacy issues, these issues that Ariel testified about, these issues that were defendant's fault. Everything the defendant tried to do made sure Ariel was never punished. The defendant knew how much a divorce would cost. He was looking at his own documents, his own records from his prior divorce. He was looking at his own records that showed how much he paid in his prior divorce, because that's what he was thinking about. He was doing that math. He was doing that math on what it would cost to divorce Ariel. There's no gray area with this confession. As Emil testified, he has no doubt about what the defendant told him. There's no phantom gust of wind that came up. There's nothing like that. The defendant confessed to Emil. He told Emil that he tried to kill Ariel. He told Emil why. He told Emil that Ariel got away. He told Emil that Ariel was having an affair. That doesn't sound like a goodbye suicide message, does it? He told Emil that he was at the end of this rope. And think back to the last thing that the defendant told Ariel before he tried to kill her. he told Ariel, I'm sick of this shit.
So after the state's closing, the defense was going to do their closing arguments, but there was a slide that the state was objecting to due to character evidence. But it's interesting that when the state is making his argument in front of the judge, I'm looking over there at Mr. Otake. He looks like he's fired up. Like, he's like ready, or maybe he's like nervous, but he's like pacing around and going around in circles. I'm like, Mr. Otake, are you okay? Anyway, I don't think I included a lot of the spicy moments from Mr. Otaku, by the way, because I was watching them as they happen. I didn't like clip them. So sorry, we don't have those in here. Not really. Now, let's get into the defense's closing arguments.
Inviting the jury to not follow the law. That's the issue here. They are allowed to comment on the evidence that was introduced at trial, and I understand that. But what this is asking is not that. It's asking the jury to consider this evidence as, again, under the only improper purpose under 404D, conformity.
State's objections overruled. You can be allowed to argue the complainant wins his credibility. It might be inadmissible under 404 with no exception under 404B, but there is the avenue of admissibility to the fact credibility in specific instances of conduct in those 608. The state's objection overruled.
The other objection from the state is somewhat throughout the defendant's proposed closing argument, there appears to be snippets of transcripts, and they appear to have been, some of them highlighted, some of them not. As the court and everybody here is well aware, the jury will not have transcripts available when they go into deliberations. And these transcripts are purported to be of the testimony during the trial. So they're not transcripts that were identified as exhibits and introduced into the trial. They're transcripts of the testimony of the trial. Everyone's aware the first question the jury always asks after going to deliberations is, can we have a transcript of the witness's testimony? And the answer is always, transcripts are not available.
They have the option to order the transcripts and use their government resources to pay for it. They chose not to. And so this is what was said in court. And I'm not taking it out of context. I'm not going to argue inappropriately. You know, I'm not going to. I mean, it's just what was said. I don't know if, I mean, what font it's in or what, like, so it is what was said. And we chose to order it and pay for it. And we've done it many times. And I'm not aware of any rule that says we can't do this. So I'm asking that actually be overruled and beyond the closing. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to begin by thanking you all for your time and dedication to this case. Most people serve on juries, 2-3 days. You guys have been here for close to a month now, and I want to just express heartfelt thanks for that. It was your time and doing that made sure that Gerhardt got a fair trial. That's what this was about, and we appreciate your time tremendously. You know, we're at the end of the trial here, but I want to actually circle back to the very beginning. The very beginning, jury selection, and remind you guys about that. Multiple days, started off with 200-something jurors, whittled it down, excuse after excuse, people couldn't be here, couldn't be fair, couldn't set aside what they heard, weren't willing to give him a fair shake. And we whittled it down to less and less and less, and we ended up with the 16 of you here. And it wasn't by accident. It wasn't by accident. It's because we saw in you what we were looking for. Jurors that would wait until you heard everything. Jurors that weren't going to convict somebody based off of media reports. Jurors that weren't going to just look at one side of things. Jurors who had logic, reason, and common sense. And most importantly, jurors who had integrity to follow the law on reasonable doubt.
Objection, move to strike. None of this is evidence.
Sustain. Please
So
continue.
I'd like to move to strike the entire closing argument up to this point.
Sustain the objection. Mr. Otake, please continue.
Oh, you know Mr. Otake was pissed about that.
He wants to, whole unwilling, unfaithful, unwilling, untrue. We talked about that. He wants to say unbelievable. I'll add another unword. Undeterred. They're undeterred by the evidence. It doesn't matter what it shows. They're going to spin it in their favor. They came up with a theory and they went to search for facts to support it. They didn't look at the evidence and say, what's the theory that points that out? They came up with a theory and they tried to find any fact they could to fit it. They were undeterred. Undeterred by the DNA. The DNA shows, and I'm going to go through it, she's holding the rock. There's a trillion level DNA on the unstained side, undeterred.
There's a trillion level DNA. Oh boy.
Oh, it must be because when she was blocking. Undeterred. The computer, I have to call Inuma again to say that sometimes the computer accesses these files. Undeterred. Still shows that he's looking at this credit card statement from 2018 to show that he has a financial motive, that it's cheaper to kill her than divorce her. Undeterred. Undeterred by the fact that eyewitness picks the wrong person out of the photo lineup. And still, she stared at him, looked into his cold, dark eyes, saw him very clearly. Picks out the wrong person. Undeterred. Undeterred by the bruise on his face. Oh, maybe it's dirt. Maybe it's dirt.
They're making such a big deal on the bruise on Gerhardt's face, but not a big deal on the complex laceration that Ariel had on her head. And it looked like she had like a chunk of her skin missing.
The presumption of innocence, you don't start in the middle. You don't start in the middle. It requires that you start here. You start here. It requires that. And then there's a gap. And it's a proof gap. This has to be filled with proof beyond a reasonable doubt before you even step this way. before you even step this way, if there's no proof beyond a reasonable doubt, you don't move. You don't move. First of all, she brought up the idea of going on a trip to Oahu. That was her idea. Why would that be the plan? If you're planning on killing somebody, you're an anesthesiologist, you have access to, as they fault him for being a doctor, I'm going to get into that a little later, having these things at home that he uses to save people's lives, that your plan is, let me not stay on Maui, where there's probably 800,000 less people and more secluded areas. Let me sneak syringes through TSA onto an airplane, come to the busiest island there is in Hawaii, 1 million people, go to a place, a trail, a parking lot I've never been to, that I'm not familiar with, and in broad daylight, 4 minutes from a very busy parking lot, I want to try and kill her. That's the plan. That makes absolutely no sense. Logic, reason, common sense. Why would you do that? With all these cars, all these people, he says 99% don't hike or whatever. He didn't know that. He put in here, this is the plan, according to them, that he's going to come to this unknown place with all these people, all these cars, and try to kill his wife, instead of just doing it on Maui. That's the plan, according to them. The life insurance issue. Now, this shows two things. I mean, we're going to get into later about how he told her about it that morning, and she learned that morning if something happened to him, she would get $1.5 million. But it's relevant in another way. If in December and January and February, you're planning to kill your wife, why are you going through the process of obtaining $1.5 million on your life for her? That's not the sign of somebody plotting to kill somebody. That's the sign of somebody trying to work on, okay, look, we got to figure this out for our kids, and if something happens, there's, he's not planning to kill her.
I think the jury could think that he's a sophisticated planner, that it might look a little too on the nose if you're taking life insurance policy months before your wife dies. So you know what? Let's do it for the both of us, and let's make mine an exorbitant amount so it doesn't look shady.
The birthday card. He writes this morning. It's the only time she got emotional because she knows it was genuine. And I'm going to talk about that more later. He writes this. There isn't an obstacle in this world too hard for me to fight through for you. I would take on anything just to see your smile.
Again, a juror could see that he wrote this birthday card to really take the suspicion off of him. It's like, oh, why would I write my wife this birthday card? Why would I kill her on the day that I gave her this card? Why would I kill her on her birthday?
You're one of the kindest, most giving, and selfless people I know. Selfless people I know. But if you're planning to kill somebody 2 hours later, he made a reservation to go to dinner that night. He's not planning on killing anybody. There was no plan.
Again, could be sophisticated planning.
She didn't, I'm not saying she was trying to hook up with Miller again. She wanted to travel for work.
I don't know. And this could be him taking a picture to show people that, like, hey, look at how happy we are. Things are okay. We're working on things. Things are great.
So this is them on the trip, right the day before. This so-called big plan. There was no big plan. First of all, the way she describes it makes it sound like he had multiple arms, like an octopus. She says that she's covering, he's on top of her, covering her mouth, and then he has a syringe, and then he's loading he has a vial, and he's loading it, but he's holding her down.
The evidence.
Can we approach, Your Honor?
Sure, come on.
The inference is, why would you have a vial unless you're trying to load it? He has a syringe in his hand. The other hand, he's holding her mouth. He's down on top of her, doing all of this while she's supposedly kicking and fighting. He only has 2 arms. And in the middle of it, they're having a full conversation. Your mom's not going to be very happy if you do this.
I don't know if I would characterize this as a full conversation, but I could see it as Ariel begging for her life, and she's trying to do her best to reason with him during that moment. Otake, he's a character, Otake's the type of person that you enjoy seeing from time to time. He's got that chaotic energy.
Why, if this was a big plan that someone's going to bring a syringe to incapacitate somebody and stab them to make it easier to throw him off the cliff, don't you think they would load the syringe ahead of time?
I do think that makes a good point, though. However, it could be that maybe he didn't want to resort to just loading her up with medication, because if they were to recover her body and found meds in her system, then it would be obvious that something happened to her, and he is an anesthesiologist, right? So maybe that was like his backup plan, just in case things were getting desperate. Because if you've already tried to push your wife off the cliff, I don't know how you come back from that if she survives. So you're probably going to make sure she doesn't survive no matter what, because then she's going to tell people, hey, he tried to push me off the cliff.
Don't you think they would load that syringe ahead of time? Their story is that he's that's the plan, and in the middle of it, he's like, oh wait, I gotta take up this vial and get it ready. That makes no sense, especially given the fact that it's undisputed he had just gone up the mountain by himself for 10 minutes. If he had it and wanted to use it, he could have loaded it. It makes no sense because it didn't happen. It didn't happen. The other thing, and I'm glad he brought up this thing about plan A, plan B, plan C, because it proves the point I was going to get to. Why in the world, if you bring a syringe to incapacitate someone to make it easier to throw them off the cliff, why would the syringe be plan B? It would be plan A. You would use the syringe first, and then you would throw them off. You wouldn't start the scuffle and make that, start the scuffle and they'd be like, oh wait, now I'm going to stab her with a syringe. That makes no sense. It makes no sense that, that's the plan. He knows if something like that happened, he's a doctor, and toxicology report would show propofol in her thing, in her blood, that this is
not evidence.
this idea about, well, he hid evidence. The rock is found right there. We don't know exactly where because HBD should have photographed it before they moved it. But why would he get rid of the syringes and leave the rock? None of that makes any sense. Her demeanor. They say, oh, she was very matter-of-fact and just told it. Ask yourself, if someone's describing what should have been the most horrific thing they've ever been through, bloody murder, someone's trying to stab you with a syringe, a monster's trying to throw you off a cliff, when you're recounting that, you might get a little emotional.
I think because her husband was her attacker and they've been going through this, probably like in the last year, she kind of just looks like she's just over it. She's over it. She's probably pissed. And the guy that you were married to was a monster. But I do think that, Taki does bring a good point because there's some members of jurors who would be like, oh, I don't see why she wasn't emotional, For me, I don't think it was a big deal, but I could see why it would be a deal for other people.
Not at all. And she's not just someone who doesn't get emotional, because we saw her get emotional when we showed her the card. When she read the birthday card, she got emotional. They try to come up at the last minute with, well, maybe when blocking it, her DNA got on it. But let's talk about that. Because we're talking more than probably, right? He wants to say maybe blocking her DNA got on it. Maybe, okay? Very important, the rock. Swabbing from the unstained area. There was a stained area that looked like blood, and there was an unstained other side. They swabbed the blood. They tested. Of course, it's Ariel's blood. I told you that in opening statement, right? The blood side was Ariel. The unstained side, they don't test for blood. They test for human skin cell touch DNA from people holding objects, they told you, okay? The unstained side had a profile for two people, Ariel and Gerhardt. This idea, well, maybe when she was blocking it hit her, that's not going to lead to that much of her DNA on it, more than him.
Objection, speculation.
If she's under attack, she's going to be scratching, doing biting, as she says. He has no scratch marks, defensive wounds. There's no bite mark on him, even though she said she bit him.
Yeah, this part I did notice. They didn't make any documentations on any bite marks on Gerhardt.
The physical evidence doesn't support her story. The affair. Look, I'm not the morality police, okay? I'm not here saying she's an awful person because she had an affair. That's for you to decide, okay?
Objection.
The relevance.
Improper.
Sustained.
And move to strike.
Granted. Last argument on morality is stricken from the record.
The relevance of the affair is primarily that she lied about it to the detective. She's deceiving the primary care doctor into believing that the Queen's record said traumatic brain injury, so the PCP will be like, oh, okay, I'll add it. It's deceptive behavior. It's incredibly misleading. She lied about her affair. She lied to her primary care doctor. There is I really like quotes, so there's an author, famous author, and what he said was, you ought to be very careful about lying, because once caught, you can never again be, in the eyes of the good and the pure, what you were before.
Objection to improper argument.
If she's going to manipulate her PCP doctor, if she's going to be deceptive to the detective, do you think for a second she would hesitate to be that way with you? He comes back and he's like, oh, you're still there. He described to you what happened. He's not saying, oh, he grabbed me and pulled me down. The scuffle started on this mountain trail and they ended up on the ground. Where did he trip or fell, whatever. He ended up on her. And then he told you how she's grabbing his testicles. And she admits to it. And then I also squeezed his testicles. That's her testimony. It was all happening so fast. We spent a lot of time going through it all. That's not real life. In real life, you don't get hours to be like, okay, and then you did what? Well, why didn't you do this? Well, did you consider that? Did you consider doing this with the rock instead? It was happening in seconds, and he reacted. And he had a reflex. And that's human. That's human. He reacted. And then he felt horrible about it. And he told you about that. He never wanted to hurt her. Never. He felt terrible about it. He was shocked that he could even do that to her in that moment. He felt horrible. The physical evidence supports this story. The FaceTime with Emil that they call a confession. There's no assurances of reliability. He explained to you what happened in that call. We need to consider it in the context in which it took place and ask ourselves, is this a reliable, thing that happened that we can rely on? Two highly emotional participants in the phone call.
But Emil, his state of mind was probably not initially highly emotional. It was probably highly emotional after the dad started confessing to him.
One is suicidal. One is thinking his life is over. He's very emotional, calling his son to say goodbye. The other, obviously, not blaming Emil at all, incredibly emotional. His grandma said she was shaking. HPD officer said it's very windy over there, notoriously windy. Very, very windy day, according to the police. He's on speakerphone on the side of a cliff talking. And he told you what he did. He was explaining to her, look, she was having this affair. She got hurt. This is her blood. She crawled away or got away. She crawled away. And she said, I tried to kill her. He was telling her that's why he was going to end his life. He wasn't confessing. He was telling her that's why I'm going to end his life.
And again, the defense trying to really minimize Emil's relationship with Ariel. Like, oh, like he's only here because he wants to stay in Maui. It has nothing to do with her.
He likes it here. He knows the only way he can stay here is living with her. He wasn't evading the police for the purpose of, I don't want to get caught. He wanted to be able to kill himself and have that option. And that's why he did what he did with the SIM card. He didn't want the police to find him because he was thinking about killing himself. And this idea that in the middle of this suicidal place of being super emotional, that you open your SIM card, you bend a paperclip, open it, and you're going to take the time to put it back where it was instead of just leave it over there. It shows he's human, that he felt terrible about this.
What was Gerhardt wearing today? Wearing like a light gray shirt and
Okay.
I feel like they started cutting it when she started to like sound like she was like slurring her words a little bit.
Does she sound like she has a traumatic brain injury to you? She sounds okay. Look, I'm not saying it wasn't a bad cut. And look, I'm not, nobody wanted her to have that cut. I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying the level of force he used, you can see. It was, he talks about chunks missing from his scalp. No doctor said that. It was soft tissue. He has an injury. Look at this. It's dried blood, and it's bruising. It's the kind of purple bruising that takes place hours later. When you first get an injury, it doesn't bruise.
But also in the photo where they took of him, 30 hours later, it's like you don't really see anything there. It's like barely even there. It looks like a blemish.
This happened earlier. Dried blood, purple bruising. That takes time to get to that point. A theory in search of facts. I talked to you guys about this. To try and use a computer to manufacture financial motive without telling us last week that sometimes, I'm sorry, how much time is that? Thank you. That sometimes the computer opens files and shows it was accessed. Don't you think that would have been fair to tell you guys that? Instead of leading you to believe that 100% Gerhardt looked at all of these things? Look, make no mistake, he said 80% of it he looked at. He's not hiding that. Undeterred. It shows he had a financial motive. He was looking up how much his divorce costed him in the past. What? He makes a lot of money as a doctor.
Yeah, but there are people who are rich and they kill. Sometimes they might feel like, well, I'm making so much money. Why should I give up some of my money for this cheating, lying wife?
Look, I'm not saying it wasn't a bad cut. And look, I'm not, nobody wanted her to have that cut. I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying the level of force he used, you can see. It was. He talks about chunks missing from his scalp. No doctor said that. It was soft tissue. You heard from Dr. Arnett, a very credible man, that apparently for 14 grand is going to sacrifice his integrity. Obviously, he's not going to do that. He told you the blood is not a good indication of the severity. The blood is not a good indication of severity. No skull fractures, no soft tissue. The tip of her thumb, he said, it was just the very tip. And sure, after the first hit, he puts her thumb, it hits it. Just the tip is fractured. We heard about that. All three doctors agree. No substantial risk of death and no serious bodily under the law. Laceration, they sold it up, she went home the next day. And again, I don't mean to, he feels terrible that happened. But he wasn't trying to kill her. That's about the amount of force that was used. Now, her eye. Let's look at this photo. The orbital is the most fragile area there is. And he said, very fragile bone. If he hit her with that rock, it would have broke bones. There was a scuffle. They landed on the ground. They're fighting. There's elbows. He's going for the rock. They're fighting for it. There's no doubt her eye got hurt in this thing. But he didn't smash her eye with a rock. Common sense judgment, dedication to these principles, and our Constitution. Dedication to it, uncompromised dedication to the presumption of innocence and reasonable doubt. Deliberate that way. Uphold your oath. Follow the law. Let this guide you. Enforce the reasonable doubt standard. Follow the law. Do these things. And integrity will be yours. Thank you for your time over the last month. On behalf of Dr. Konig and Manta Dirks, thank you all for your time.
Mark Twain also said, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. Think back to defendant's testimony. Think back to every time he was asked on cross-examination something that made him look bad, something that made him look like he had a motive, something that was incriminating. Think back to every single time the defendant was asked something like that. And what was his answer? I don't recall. Ariel Konig was able to sit here and testify in front of you for 3 reasons. First, she had her intuition. She saw the defendant looking at her feet on that trail. She saw the defendant tracking her every move. She saw the defendant making sure he saw where she was. And that's what made her feel uneasy. Second, she fought back. She fought for her life that day. And defense wanted to characterize it as a full conversation, but it was Ariel begging for her life from the defendant. It was Ariel saying, think about the kids. It was Ariel saying, nobody's going to believe this was an accident. This is Ariel trying to reason with somebody who is trying to kill. And the third reason, and the most important reason that Ariel was here to testify to you, is Amanda Morris and Sarah Bucksbaum hearing a call for help, going forward, looking at what they saw, and helping Ariel out. Because the evidence shows that is the only thing that stopped the defendant that day. This is a couple who's going through it in their marriage. Why is it time to renew life insurance? Does that make any sense? No. What the life insurance is, what many of defendant's actions are, is the defendant covering his tracks. The cover-up proves the crime. Defendant had control of the scene when he was done, so he took the evidence with him. He didn't need to take the rock. In fact, he knew that he was seen with the rock. He knew that Amanda and Sarah saw him with the rock. Why take it? And what reason would Ariel have to make up the syringe? None. Think about what Ariel knew. Ariel knew that he had tried to push her. Ariel knew they were right next to a cliff. Ariel knew that people walked up as she was being beaten with that rock. She had enough already. There's no reason to make up the syringe. Defendant's attorney said something. These are the facts you just can't make up. And that's what the syringe is in this case. It's a fact you just can't make up. Think about the list of people that would have to participate in this, what essentially is being alleged as a massive conspiracy to believe what defendant's saying. You have to disbelieve Ariel. You have to disbelieve Emil. You have to disbelieve Amanda. You have to disbelieve Sarah. You have to disbelieve the medical evidence. You have to disbelieve the doctor that the defense hired. And you have to disbelieve what you saw with your own eyes. That's why the defense asked you to close your eyes when they played that video. They wanted you to ignore what you see. That's what this case is about. That's what they're asking you to do. Open your eyes, make a decision based only on the evidence, and the decision is clear. The defendant tried to kill her. The defendant tried 3 different ways, and he learned out multiple times that day. It is harder to kill than you may imagine.
I haven't seen the verdict yet, but I see that they deliberated for about 8 hours and 26 minutes, which I'm kind of surprised. I mean, it's good. You want people to think about it thoroughly, but 8 hours, that is a long time. I thought it would be a lot shorter than that. All right, let's watch the verdict together. What do you guys think? The worst that he's looking at is attempted second-degree murder. Okay, we have Otake, we have Gerhardt. I forgot his name. I forgot his last name. I kept hearing it earlier.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Joel Garner for the state. Also President's Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Franklin.
Whose phone is that? And it's like one of the worst, loudest ringtones out there. Oh my goodness. Look at Mr. Otake's face. Oh, is he reaching in his pocket? Is it his ringtone?
And Don Vaccaro Jr.
Afternoon, Mr. Garner. Afternoon, Mr. Vaccaro.
Mr. Otake. Mr. Otake. He forgot to put his phone on silence, I think.
Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Thomas Otake and Manta Dirks on behalf of Dr. Gerhardt Konig.
Oh, Mr. Dirk. That's his last name. The one that's to the left of the defendant.
We, the jury in this case, finds the defendant guilty of attempted manslaughter based upon extreme mental or emotional disturbance, dated 4/8/26 by the foreperson.
Gentlemen, you can be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to call you by chair number, not by name, but by chair number, and I'm going to ask that you answer out loud either yes or no. If you agree with the verdict that was read out loud here in court, you would answer yes. If you disagree with the verdict that was read out loud in court, you would answer no.
Gerhardt looks quite upset. I thought that maybe he would feel better that he didn't get attempted second-degree murder. they went with a lesser serious one. I mean, he's still facing a lot of possible prison time. He's looking up to 20 years in prison, and he is around, I think, what, like no, he's like late 40s now, I think, right? Yeah, late 40s. I forgot how old he is, 47 years old. So, I mean, quite honestly, bye-bye. That's a lot of years that you might be looking at being incarcerated. Now, he's kind of just like processing it. Each of the jurors, they're going to confirm that they all voted guilty for the manslaughter. There's an article that I read where it explains, I guess, why they decided to go with the lesser charge. It says that the jury foreperson talked to NBC News after the verdict, and the reason why they decided to, convict him of the attempted manslaughter based on extreme mental or emotional disturbance, because we didn't feel the evidence would uphold the fact that he intended on murdering her. So that is what they thought. And quite honestly, since they were debating or deliberating for about almost 9 hours, it would make sense that that's the reason why it took so long, because they didn't agree with second-degree murder, and they were just like slowly maybe just working their way down and maybe just going back and forth. His sentencing will be August 13th, so about 4 months from now. So I will see you guys for his sentencing. I hope to hear from Ariel, to hear from Emil, the family members, and the victim impact statement. And quite honestly, I really do feel like they were trying to gaslight Emil on what he heard from his father that day. So I would love to hear what Emil has to say about his dad's testimony about that. I thought they would convict him with attempted second-degree murder, but because they deliberated so long, it makes sense, because they were going through the lesser charges to see which one applies to Gerhardt. So what do you guys think? Do you think Gerhardt tried to kill his wife? Do you think that he was under extreme emotional distress? Or do you think it was more calculated than that it was more sophisticated than him just being under extreme distress and attacking her at the spur of the moment because of what she brought up about the work trip? Man. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed listening about this case. It was definitely very interesting to me because, again, when I saw testimony of the complainant, I'm going to call her the victim now. I mean, we've already found him guilty of attempted manslaughter. When we saw testimony popping up, it's me, my dog's here. I guess but I was like, oh, she's alive. Okay, I want to hear from her. And then I saw that her son testified, and I was like, oh, this case is going to be very interesting. So I kind of want to just do a recap for you guys, watch it, and I hope you guys enjoy this. I'm going to be gone for a few days. I hope you guys have a good one. I do have something that I want to cover for you guys that I think you will enjoy when I come back. I already got a hold of some of the documents, but yeah, we'll be back, and hopefully I won't be too jet lagged. But thank you so much for watching. Join the Discord. Feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys again. Stop by the live streams when we have them. And thank you so much for hanging out with us. All right, you guys have a wonderful weekend and take care. I hope you guys enjoyed part 1. I was actually planning on doing one whole video for this, but I don't know if people were going to be like, oh my God, it's like a 5-hour video. So I think sometimes maybe breaking it up mentally might be better. Also, it gave me time to edit the first half and have that go out a lot quicker. So guys, thank you so much for watching and take care. Bye.